Chapter 750. The darkness of the night had become a big obstacle for both sides. It turned out that the accuracy of the machine gun squad would be greatly reduced if they could not see where the bullets landed and the effect of the shooting. Although the number of machine guns used in the ambush was not as many as in the battle at Coldwind Ridge, it was not enough to completely stop the cavalry charge. When the enemy abandoned their torches, there were always dozens of people in the front line who could break through the crossfire net, howling and rushing to the artillery position, and then became Danny's targets. The enemy also could not tell where the real threat was. They could not see their companions being shot to pieces in the fire net, and they did not know what kind of weapons were set up on the sand dunes on both sides. When they realized that there were fewer and fewer people around them, it was already too late. Without the guidance of the torches, the cavalrymen who formed the new front line did not know what happened to their companions in the front. They could only see the roaring cannons and the flashing light spots on both sides. No matter how they thought about it, the thunder-like bombardment was more threatening than the sand dunes on both sides where they could not even see the shadows of people. It was in this kind of obstacle that the watchdogs did not collapse immediately. Instead, they formed multiple lines and rushed to the position like waves. In the eyes of these battle-hardened clans, the continuous charge of sharp blades was the best way to destroy the enemy's will to fight. Speed represented power. In the face of the tide-like attack, the slaves and mercenaries could not hold on for long. No matter how sturdy the front line was, once the cavalry broke in, it would not take long for them to become a pile of loose sand. This created an excellent hunting opportunity for Danny. Soon he took down his 20th prey. But at the same time, he also noticed a strange phenomenon. Several times when he aimed at the enemy in the front, there was always a bullet that hit the target before he did. It was as if someone was competing with him. If that was all, it would not be a big deal. What made Danny excited was that the shooter hiding in the night was definitely a top hunter. Because the direction of the enemy's fall was always the same. If the target was shot in the upper body, the target would fall backward. If the target was shot on the horse, the target would fall forward. Danny could not explain the specific principle, but it was most likely the case. The target falling to the side could only mean that the position of the hunter was on one side of the sand dunes, and the target was shot in the torso, not the horse. What did this mean? Not only could the enemy capture a rider galloping in the dark night, but he could also predict where the target would arrive before firing. Coupled with the unpredictable cold winds of the desert, this skill could almost be considered as divine. Was there such an expert in the army? Was it a member of the precision shooting squad? Or a soldier from the firearm battalion who was selected by His Majesty and given the new bolt gun, just like himself? Danny suppressed his excitement and sped up the movements of his hands. He didn't want to lose to his opponent, especially in front of Malt. There's one left on the right, 250 meters away from the defensive line. He's mine. In the latter half of the night, the thunder gradually subsided, but Thuram never heard the cheers of the returning warriors. Even though they were caught off guard, judging from the number of torches, the watchdogs had gathered nearly 2,000 men. Regardless of victory or defeat, there had to be some news, right? But after the thunder subsided, there was no more movement in the night. Like the mouth of a giant beast from the abyss, the more than 2,000 people were all swallowed up, not even spitting out a bone. The fire in the oasis also gradually subsided. All the clansmen who came to save their master were sent to put out the fire, which was what Iron Axe had asked him to do. Thuram didn't know whether he should be happy or sad at the moment. The watchdogs had never stopped oppressing his clansmen. Even in his dreams he imagined that one day, they would meet with great misfortune, such as angering the big clans in the city, or being utterly defeated by a rising challenger. In short, the most pleasing thing for him was that the other party suffered a disaster. But the new challenger was Iron Axe. Iron Axe also intended to drag Thuram into the storm of fighting for the throne of the clan. Perhaps Thuram should persuade him to occupy the bloodstained land first, and then carefully consider his next move? The golden-eyed divine lady behind him was indeed very powerful, but the divine lady of the Wildflame clan was also not to be trifled with. Especially as the first clan, they could choose the way of duel. In a one-on-one duel, Thuram was not optimistic about the divine lady brought by Iron Axe. although the holy duel was known as the fairest way of competition. In fact, it was also a competition between the clans behind the duel. Not only could they set up traps before the duel, but they also might not be able to avoid the tricks of the other party in the duel. The tragic exile of the Wuxia clansmen was proof that only a few warriors who could fight could not guarantee the final victory. But what puzzled him the most was why the king of Grey Castle was suddenly interested in this desert. In the eyes of the northerners, this place had always been synonymous with barbarism and backwardness. They did not allow the Sand Nation to enter the kingdom's territory, nor were they willing to intervene in the disputes between clans. The only people who traveled between the two places were merchants, and their commodities were slaves. In addition, what did Iron Axe mean by bringing order and oasis? It was said that only the three gods' emissary could make oasis grow in the desert and stop the storm. In other words, the southernmost region was originally a lush land full of fragrant grass, green trees, and gurgling water. It was not until the emissary died that the land became what it was today. When the three gods sent a new emissary, the southernmost region would return to its original state. But except for that illusory rumor, no one had ever been able to realize this. Otherwise, the Sand Nation would not be fighting for water and food all day long. Just as they were waiting anxiously, a white light finally appeared on the horizon. Then, Thuram faintly heard a strange horn sound. It was not as deep and dull as the horn, but slightly sharp, as if it was repeatedly ticking. Not long after, a strange team appeared at the edge of the oasis. They lined up in an unstoppable manner, and approached the blood-stained land. Then, a fierce battle broke out with the remaining watchdogs. Perhaps it was not as fierce as he had expected. A group of clan warriors raised their sabers and rushed forward. Then, after a series of crackling explosions, they all fell to the ground. The rest of the people scattered, no longer caring about their fallen companions who were moaning on the ground. After entering the oasis, they quickly took control of several sentry towers and surrounded the tavern. Thuram knew he no longer had a choice when the brown-skinned woman with bluish-gray hair walked into the room. Although it had been 7 or 8 years since they last met, he could still see some of her mother's features on her face. Chapter 751. As soon as Rebecca Bloodwhip got out of bed, he heard the news that the small oasis in the northwest had changed hands. Really? He frowned. Although he had seen the oasis on fire last night, he did not expect that the Howling clan could not even hold out for one night. Was there a new clan with such a powerful force in the Silver Stream recently? Why don't I remember anything about it? Rebecca patted his concubine lying beside him, and asked her to wrap herself up in a blanket. After that, he turned to his subordinate and said, "Tell me more." Yes. According to the report of those guys who escaped, the fire in the oasis was not set by the challengers, but by Godfather's heavenly fire. Bullshit. Rebecca spat. Those cowards. Whenever they encounter something they can't solve, they blame it on the three gods. I'm going to hang them all at the gate of Iron Sand City. But the subordinate hesitated for a moment. My men went to the camp in the small oasis this morning, and found that the scene there was quite similar to what they described. There were many pitch-black pits on the ground, and corpses and house fragments were scattered everywhere. It didn't look like a simple arson. House fragments? Yes. It looked like a giant sandworm or an earth-drilling scorpion ran over the camp and tore them into pieces. The subordinate chose his words carefully. Most of those who stayed in the camp were unlucky, while those who had fun outside organized a counterattack. But they were defeated before they could even see their opponents. In other words, those idiots were ambushed and fled in panic before they could approach their opponents. Rebecca began to doubt whether he had been too kind to the watchdogs. He had spent a lot of effort to win them over, but this was all they could do? Or was it that a long and stable life had eroded their strength more than he had expected? And then? So far, they don't even know which clan occupied the small oasis. My men are still asking around. We should be able to get the news soon. The subordinate paused and said hesitantly, but some of the refugees said that they saw many northerners. Northerners. This news made Rebecca take it seriously. Naked, he walked to the window and looked towards the northwest. The fire had long been extinguished, leaving only a few wisps of black smoke. Although the Howling clan was the watchdog that Iron Whip and Chipped Bone had recruited, he did not really care about their lives. The challenger system was not so much a qualification test, but rather a protective wall set up by the 6 clans for themselves. He only understood this after he settled in Iron Sand City. The Holy Duel was only a small-scale fight, but the battle for the small oasis was an all-out war between the 2 clans. It was not uncommon for both sides to fight to the death. After all, even if they did not enter the Iron Sand City, the oasis was a place that every clan had to fight for in order to grow stronger. No matter which side won, they would usually have to pay a heavy price and would need a long time to lick their wounds. During this period, it was not difficult for the big clans to turn the challengers into watchdogs, especially those clans who believed that the compromise was only temporary and that sooner or later, they would challenge each other to a duel. In the end, none of them managed to ring the sacred bell of Iron Sand City. At that time, a new challenger would appear and sweep the watchdogs out of the game. The large clans used this method to ensure that they wouldn't fall into a predicament where they would be badly hurt. Now that Iron Whip had climbed to the 4th place, even if the challengers challenged him to a duel, they would not come to him. Therefore, it was not a big deal for the small oasis to change hands. However, it was different for the Northerners. For example, the Queen of Clearwater had caused a lot of chaos in Iron Sand City. Many people yearned for the evergreen land in the north even though they had been reduced to slaves and thugs. The departure of the 2 potential challengers had emptied the small oasis, so the other challengers could easily challenge each other. Taking advantage of the chaos, Rebecca seized the opportunity and successfully became the 4th big clan. Now what tricks did they want to play? Keep an eye on those people and find out what's going on. He turned around and ordered his subordinates. Which city did the Northerners come from? How many of them are there? What kind of weapons they have and what they're planning to do? Yes, chieftain. Perhaps he should have a discussion with the other big clans. According to the rules of the southernmost region, outsiders were not allowed to interfere. In the afternoon, one of his subordinates brought back a piece of news that Rebecca Bloodwhip could not believe. What did you say? The Wuxia clan? That's what they said. All the flags in the oasis have been replaced with the Wuxia clan's war patterns. I also saw the Wuxia princess who was sold as a slave. She has become a divine lady and is recruiting new clansmen. It seems that many of them have responded. How? How is this possible? Rebecca was not ignorant of the Northern Kingdom. In the eyes of the people of Grey Castle, the divine lady was completely regarded as an evil existence. If the Sand Nation slaves were already miserable enough, then a divine lady slave would never have the slightest chance to make a comeback. But now, how did she win the support of the Northerners and lead them back to the southernmost region as an avenger? He felt an indescribable sense of absurdity and panic. The Majins had been suppressed in the desert not because they liked the desert, but because they had never been able to confront Grey Castle head-on. If the Majins wanted to harm Iron Sand City, the clans might unite to fight against the outsiders. But if the Wuxia clan, who had the support of the Northerners, only targeted his family, would the other clans still be closely allied with Iron Whip? This was a question that almost did not need to be answered. Damn it! He smashed the wine glass on the table onto the ground and stomped on it, turning it into a pile of crystal fragments. If you want to avenge your father's death through a holy duel, come on! Rebecca thought fiercely. The Northerners may be well-armed and numerous, but in a duel, the Sand Nation of the Majins are the bravest warriors. I'll let you know the taste of despair. Just then, another subordinate entered the hall and said, Chieftain, the Wuxia clan has sent a gift. What? Rebecca felt the blue veins on his forehead throbbing. A gift? Yes, it's in the garden outside. Take me to see it, he said through gritted teeth. It was a huge wooden box, about the length of a man and half the width of a man. It looked as if it had been pieced together by several ordinary wooden boards. There were iron nails at the 4 corners, and nothing unusual could be seen from the outside. Where's the person who sent it? Rebecca asked. He's gone. How many of them? Only one person. One person? He raised his eyebrows and stepped forward to kick the box. The wooden box suddenly rolled several times and made a clanking sound. It seemed that there were other things inside. But judging from its weight, it was almost hollow. Are they broken limbs, flesh, or skin peeled off? Other than threats and bluffs, he couldn't think of anything else the other party would send over. Move to Stone Castle, Rebecca said coldly. I'd like to see what tricks they have up their sleeves. For the fastest and error-free novel reading, please visit Chapter 752. His subordinate opened the wooden box and revealed the gift inside. It was a coffin. A fine coffin. Both the gold foil and the lacquer were exquisite. The pattern on the cover was a pitch-black short whip, which was the war pattern of the Iron Whip clan. Rebecca Bloodwhip was startled at first, but then he could not help sneering. That's it? I thought they would put something more frightening. He shook his head. Skulls, ears, human skin. That's what Iron Sand City does. Coffins? The southernmost region doesn't need such superfluous things. All the dead people here would be thrown into the desert, and then turned into bones under the high temperature. No matter what their status was before, it would be the same after death. Only northerners needed such a coy wooden box. Even if they were dead, they still had to imprison themselves in it like an eternal cage. Osha bitches think they can frighten me like this? He breathed heavily. She had been a slave in Grey Castle for so long that she had probably forgotten the Sand Nation's way of threatening. But this insult still made Rebecca's blood boil. Bring me my axe, he shouted. Immediately, a clansman came with a cast iron axe. The handle was as tall as a man, and the dark axe head was as big as a head. Although he was the chief of the Iron Whip clan, his favorite weapon was this heavy battle axe. Whether it was fighting with the wild beasts in the desert or beheading the challengers, it was very convenient to wield it. In the face of absolute power, all resistance were meaningless. As long as the axe hit the target, even if he was wearing a northerner's armor, he would be killed in one blow. Of course, it had also drunk the blood of Osha clansmen, including women and children. He forgot to tell Drow Silvermoon that the exiles had not arrived at Endless Cape, because he had taken a detour and arrived in front of the escort team, then hacked them to death one by one in the yellow sand. He wasn't worried that they would come back for revenge one day. He simply enjoyed the pleasure of killing. Coffins? Fuck them. Rebecca spat and shouted. He raised the battle axe with both hands and swung it at the cover with the iron whip pattern. Crack! A large number of sparks appeared on both sides of the axe, as if it had struck some sort of iron or stone. The coffin did not split into two as he thought. The feeling from the handle told him that this exquisite wooden box was not empty. It was stuffed full of things. But it was too late. After the sparks, an even more dazzling light bloomed from the inside of the coffin. Then it instantly filled the entire hall and quickly expanded outwards. However, Rebecca didn't see it. When the light swept past his body, his eyeballs and tongue had already been crushed and torn apart by the rapidly expanding wave of air. After that, his head, limbs, and internal organs, with an earth-shattering boom. All the residents of Iron Sand City saw this incredible scene. Raging flames and thick smoke gushed out from the bottom of the rising Sunstone Castle, like a raging underground fire. The garden wall was razed to the ground by an invisible giant hand. The entire stone castle seemed to shake violently and then fall apart in the thick smoke. First, the walls fell down, then the pillars and the roof. The falling stones accelerated the eruption of the smoke. Finally, the collapsed stone castle sent a column of smoke into the sky, connecting with the gray sky. It was as if a Tower of Babel had appeared in Iron Sand City. Thuram, who was in the Oasis Tavern, also saw this scene. It was not until this moment that he realized what the story Iron Axe had told him was about. The coffin filled with snow powder, the weight reduced by the Divine Lady, the flint stuck to the cover, and the fuse connected to the top of the cover. No matter if the coffin was destroyed by brute force or the cover was opened normally, it would lead to an unparalleled thunder. Although he did not know what snow powder and the fuse were, he knew what thunder was. The muffled sound that could spread for miles, and the column of smoke that could be seen in the blood-stained land, showed how powerful the unbridled heavenly thunder was. If Iron Whip didn't lie to him, and the scene in Iron Sand City was really caused by that coffin, the chief of the Iron Whip clan would probably die. However, Thuram did not expect that Iron Whip would really attack the Iron Whip clan, which ranked the fourth before the duel, and retaliate in such a blatant way? You. Thuram looked at Iron Axe, whose expression remained unchanged, and could not utter a complete sentence for a long time. Years ago, Rebecca Bloodwhip sullied the holy duel and failed the three gods' expectations. How could I have a fair fight with a man who had lost the right to duel in the land of fire? Iron Axe said calmly, Rebecca and his clansmen were just a bunch of cowards. I never regarded them as my opponents from the very beginning. But Iron Whip is a big clan after all. Because of this kind of ending is more suitable for them, rather than a glorious death in the ring. Iron Axe shook his head. Besides, the Wuxia clan will not violate the rules set by the three gods. Once the opponent surrenders, we'll put away our weapons and spare the duelists' lives. He paused for a moment. Think about it. If you were the chief of the Iron Whip clan, and you knew that the Wuxia clan had come back, what would you do? Thuram immediately understood what Iron Axe meant. Indeed, if the rules were broken once, they could be broken again. A trespasser who did not abide by the rules set by the three gods would bring them endless trouble. Even if they wanted to reverse the defeat 8 years ago through the holy duel, they would still be harassed and framed by their opponents before and after the duel began. Therefore, it was better to crush them completely from the very beginning than to be tired of guarding against them later. But if Rebecca didn't open the coffin or destroy it, your plan wouldn't work, would it? Thuram had only one question left in his mind. The chief of the Iron Whip clan is violent and likes to destroy and kill. It's not much harder to guess what he would do than to tease a monkey. Iron Axe slightly raised the corner of his mouth. Besides, the snow powder coffin is just an appetizer. Even if Rebecca luckily escapes, there are still many gifts waiting for him. But now it seems that the three gods will not protect a traitor who has turned his back on them. Hearing this, Thuram could not help shuddering. When he swore loyalty to Drow Silvermoon and the new Wuxia clan, he had also sworn in the name of the three gods. Iron Axe's last sentence was also a warning to him. Now we can talk about business. The half-breed patted Thuram's shoulder as if nothing had happened. Another reason why I chose you is that you know Iron Sand City like the back of your hand. People in the oasis say that there's nothing in the desert that you don't know. It's just that I've been here for a long time and heard more stories. After defeating the Watchdog and easily killing the Iron Whip clan, Thuram became much more respectful to Iron Axe, the Princess of Wuxia, and the Grey Castle force behind them. But if I know something, I'll definitely tell you in detail. Good. If you want to win the holy duel, you have to carefully understand your enemies. You can start with the warriors and divine ladies of each clan. Iron Axe nodded. For the fastest and error-free novel reading, please visit Chapter 753. At present, everything is going well in the southernmost region. The Iron Whip clan has been destroyed. Echo asked me to express her gratitude to you. It takes time to prepare for the holy duel. I predict that the clans of Iron Sand City will go to the land of fire in a week. During this time, I've hired some of my clansmen to mark the location of the underground Styx River. I believe that we'll soon be able to find a Blackwater River that's relatively close to the coast. Also, what do you plan to do with the goddess of the clan? Greetings. Iron Axe. Your Majesty, this is the message from the southernmost region. The sigil of listening flashed a faint red light. Countess Spear's voice paused after the report, obviously waiting for Roland's reply. Then Nightingale handed the other talisman over. Since she was sitting on the table, the seal was placed right next to her slender thighs. Although it was not summer, she was still wearing tight black trousers, showing off her perfect figure. If Roland wanted to talk to the sigil, he had to get close to her legs. It had to be said that this was a difficult choice. He didn't know whether he should look at him openly or pretend to glance at him casually. Ahem, well done. I mean Iron Axe. Your Majesty, are you all right? The Earl replied. I can hear your voice is a little hoarse. Please keep warm in the winter. Your body is not as strong as a witch's. I'm fine. Roland cleared his throat and said. Tell Iron Axe that if there are no major deviations, let him continue with the plan. As for the goddess, we can fight for her. But if she doesn't want to leave the southernmost region, don't force her. Is that all? All right, I'll let you know if I have any other requests. I understand. Then allow me to take my leave, Your Majesty. The red light on the seal was extinguished. Roland turned around and exhaled softly. What's with this feeling of loss? Nightingale chuckled and put away the sigil. She returned to the recliner in a flash and continued to munch on the dried fish while reading the comic strip of the witch story. Roland pursed his lips and focused his attention on the matter at hand. In this desert operation, they had invested all their sigil of listening and used Countess Spear Passy of Fallen Dragon Ridge as a transit point to achieve instant communication between Neverwinter and the advanced troops. Although communication was still a little inconvenient, compared to the initial delivery of letters that took 10 to 15 days and the daily flight of messengers, this method of communication was already considered as fast as lightning. He finally had the feeling of being able to survey the entire situation without leaving the territory. Unfortunately, the sigil of listening required a witch to inject her magic power into it to take effect. Moreover, in order to achieve a conversation between two parties, at least 2 sets of sigil and 2 witches were needed. This meant that it was destined to be unable to replace the telephone and other communication tools that ordinary people could use. Now the first telephone line in the western region had entered the stage of laying. It would directly connect the office of the castle to the city hall of the Longsong district. The second and third lines were also being planned. It was expected that the 2 city halls would be connected, so that orders would only need a phone call. Considering that it was time-consuming and laborious to erect electric poles, and that it was prone to be damaged by ice and snow, Roland decided to lay the cable along the mountain range and sink it into the ground through Lotus, which was both convenient and safe. After the mountain defense line was established, he was bound to increase the line of communication with the front line. At that time, he was afraid that he would have to put more than 10 hand-cranked telephones in his office. In addition, the migration of the ancient Tequila witches was also the focus of Roland's attention. Maggie and Lightning took on the role of early warning and expanded the scope of investigation to the area 10 kilometers north of the mountains in order to detect large-scale demonic beast attacks in advance. After all, the relics of the gods were likely to determine the survival of the tribe, so it was not too much to handle it carefully. He had many conversations with Pasha in the past 2 weeks. Their plan was very simple. First, let the worm carrier open up a mountain passage to the western region, and then choose a place with stable rock strata and fewer forks to build a palace. Next, the ancient witches would move the carrier, the documents, and the bodies of the gods' punishment army to the new residence. Finally, it was the turn of the instrument of divine retribution and the relics of the gods. The one who was most enthusiastic about the relocation was a witch named Fran, or rather, the devouring worm. She opened her bloody mouth, twisted her plump body, and squeezed in front of the phantom instrument. When she excitedly expressed her gratitude to Roland, he was really shocked. Later, after Pasha explained it to him, he understood that the witches who had devoted themselves to the carrier could no longer be stored in Scourge's body. Their perception and consciousness were consolidated with the new body. The advantage was that they did not need to go through a long period of practice to use the carrier, but the disadvantage was that once the body was damaged, they had no spare carrier to replace it. Come to think of it, if the witches did not use this method of joining, perhaps they would not be able to move the carrier even if they practiced for a lifetime. How could a person who was used to 4 limbs and 10 fingers control countless tentacles, or move forward like a worm? On the contrary, once they adapted to this strange carrier, it was estimated that there was no way to return to the previous way of life. Because the devouring worm consumed a lot of food to feed, when not in use, the ancient witches had to transfer Fran back into the soul container and put her into eternal sleep. This was obviously not a good experience. It could be said that Fran sacrificed her own future for the continuation of the Tequila tribe. The price she paid was even heavier than that of Pasha, Aletheia, and the others who had been transformed into the original carriers. At least the latter could always observe the world and feel the changes and replacement of the outside world. Therefore, it could be imagined how grateful she was to Roland. The key point was that he had boasted that there was endless work waiting for Fran in Neverwinter, which meant that he had to spend a lot of food to keep her energetic. Fortunately, the worm was an omnivorous carrier, so it could accept both grain and meat. I want to eat hot meat porridge sprinkled with spices and a whole cow roasted until its skin is shiny. When Fran said these words, she was basically drooling. Although the worm looked a little ugly, like the sarcoma, it could sense the outside environment in a unique way, including taste, pain, and temperature. Roland could only accept her gratitude with a smile and tears in his heart. It seemed that no matter in which world, the construction industry was a huge gold-devouring monster. He also asked Pasha what the original and central carriers relied on to fill their stomachs. The answer he got was soil and high temperature, which was also the reason why they liked to soak in magma. This answer made Roland feel a little relieved. Compared to the devouring worm, the sarcoma probably absorbed energy more like a plant. In this way, he did not have to bear the food expenses of these people who were close to an infinite life. Just as he was thinking about how to plan the defense line in the mountains, so that the military facilities built underground could better connect with the existing crossroads, and even the ancient witch's palace, he suddenly heard an explosion outside the window. Surprised, Roland turned to look at the French window, and saw a plume of black smoke rising from a corner of the town, mixed with some faintly visible flames. The smoke came from the direction of the school near the stone inner wall. Nightingale. I'll ask Sylvie and Phyllis to go and have a look. Your Majesty, don't leave the office. I'll be back soon. While speaking, Nightingale had already disappeared into the mist. For the fastest and error-free novel reading, please visit Chapter 754. Lily, have you heard? Mystery Moon rushed into the bedroom and put her face in front of Lily. Something happened in the college district. Go away. You're blocking my light. She pushed Mystery Moon's face away and continued to adjust the focus of the microscope. She sighed inwardly. Today's replication test was probably going to fail again. There was not only an explosion, but also a big fire. Who do you think did it? The church or the demons? The church has been defeated by His Majesty. The demons are thousands of miles away from us. Lily raised her head impatiently and rolled her eyes at her. I guess some idiot stole the waste from the chemistry lab and brought it into the classroom. Similar things had happened before. For example, half a month ago, a researcher casually brought a failed piece of pyrocotton back home, wanting to use it as a kindling for the stove. In the end, it was accidentally set on fire by a child, almost burning the house to the ground. His Majesty was furious after the incident. His voice could even be heard in the castle reprimanding those responsible. After that, the regulations of the chemistry lab were increased several times. The new regulations, which Lily had seen in scroll, were changed from a thin piece of parchment to a book as thick as an index finger. But there was an explosion this time. How can you be so indifferent to what happened in Neverwinter? This is also our home, Mystery Moon said plausibly. Stop bluffing. You're just too curious and want to know the answer as soon as possible. Lily said angrily. That's why it should be handled by more professional people. Besides, what I'm doing now is also for the development of Neverwinter. She paused and said, but you've been interfering with my experiment and idling around all day. Oh. Mystery Moon gave a strange smile. Then what have you achieved? Lily suddenly felt suffocated. No, right? You've been staring at the microscope for more than a year, but you haven't helped His Majesty. My electromagnetic power has brought light to His Majesty at night, so that people can continue to work even at night. Mystery Moon raised her nose and said, Oh, but I don't despise you, my old friend. Finding out the truth of the problem is also a help to His Majesty. Please don't mind me, Lily said hatefully. She did not know why it was difficult for her to transform the brood mother into a specific species of tiny insects. She could control the shape of the brood mother and try to get as close as possible to the target she wanted to assimilate, but she could not break through this obstacle. The little girl faintly felt that something seemed to be missing between the two, but she couldn't find a specific clue. So after her ability evolved, other than treating some cold plagues, she spent the rest of her time dealing with microscopes. She could not promote the production of Neverwinter like Anna and Soroya, nor could she bring happiness to the people like Evelyn. She had always been brooding over this. Lily really liked to observe the complicated world that was invisible to the naked eye, but she did not want to waste His Majesty's food for nothing, although she would never admit it verbally. Now even the stupid mystery moon had gone ahead of her. This kind of unhappiness really made her heart ache. No, I was wrong. Just take it as me accompanying myself. Seeing that she couldn't pull Lily away, Mystery Moon immediately resumed her pleading look. She held Lily's arm and cried, "There's no harm in going out for a walk. You'll be bored to death if you stay cooped up in your room all day." Every time this happened, it was difficult for Lily to refuse the other party cleanly. She impatiently pulled Mystery Moon's arm away, looked at the latter and sighed. "I know, but don't cause trouble for His Majesty and Sister Nightingale." "I promise." How come she did not realize that Mystery Moon would become so clingy after they became familiar with each other? If she had known this, she would have insisted on asking Leaf or Scroll to be her roommate. Then, "Are we going on foot now? Wait for me here for a while. There are a few sisters who also want to find out the truth. I'll call them all here." Mystery Moon said and hurriedly ran out. A quarter of an hour later, she returned to the room with several witches. "Everyone is here. Let's go." Lily was stunned to see the 5 witches behind her. "You're going to take so many people with you? We also want to help His Majesty." The one who raised her hand to answer was Amy, who was just as friendly as Mystery Moon. She even looked more lively than Mystery Moon. "If His Majesty allows it." The one who said this was Maggie, who was a little timid. Well, Vanilla did not need to see. He must have been dragged here by Mystery Moon. Mystery Moon's theory is very interesting. "I'll go with you." My God, even Evelyn was here. Didn't she have a winemaking task today? I just need to do what I did last time when I secretly read the test paper. If there are people watching, I won't use my ability. The last one was a Xia. She looked quite nervous, but she was more eager than last time. "Oh no, these guys have all been bewitched by Mystery Moon. She asked you to come just so that one more person can share the responsibility if His Majesty blames her in the future." However, seeing Summer's appearance, Lily felt a lot more relaxed. Neither Nightingale nor the Ministry of Justice took Summer with them, which meant that what happened in the academy was not a big deal. Perhaps, as she had guessed, there were several witnesses when the incident happened, so the consequences were not too serious. "Forget it, I'll just accompany them for a stroll." Maggie summoned the magic ark, which carried them to the academy area. Through the roof of the ark, Lily could clearly see the scenery on the ground. It was a wonderful feeling. It was as if they were sneaking under the ground, but it was like swimming in the sea. When they looked up, they could see the blue waves on the surface. A cordon had been pulled up near the academy, and black uniformed policemen were guarding at every intersection to prevent residents from approaching. However, this symbolic blockade was meaningless to the ark. They went straight through the streets and walls and entered the academy. This was originally a mansion of a noble in Stronghold. Later, it was further expanded by His Majesty, and became the primary academy of Neverwinter today. However, most of the houses were still made of wood, instead of the red bricks and cement used in the residential area. At this time, the fire had long been put out. Judging from the blackened outer wall, the location of the fire should be on the 2nd floor of the main teaching building. Part of the wall had fallen off, and a pile of glass debris was scattered on the ground, probably caused by the explosion. They waited underground for a while to make sure that no one came in or out of the academy, and the whole building was empty. Then they asked Maggie to control the ark and float to the ground next to the teaching building. For the fastest and error-free novel reading, please visit Chapter 755. A group of people crept into the building and climbed up to the 2nd floor. The smell of burning wood still lingered in the corridor, and scattered books and papers could be seen everywhere, probably left by the students who fled in panic. Following the smell of burning wood, they soon found the scene of the accident, a classroom near the end of the corridor. Walking into the room, Lily noticed that one corner of the room had become pitch black, and the entire wall was cracked, and the cracks extended to the floor. The fire area was not large, and the range of the fire was obvious. The blackened wood spread like ripples from deep to shallow, which did not seem to be caused by natural arson at all. However, what she was most concerned about were the cracks. They were almost as if they had been cut by an axe, and the gaps had been completely carbonized. When she put her fingers into them, she could still feel a faint residual heat. It should be here. Mystery Moon walked around the corner and said, "Summer, I'll leave the rest to you." "Well, if someone comes, remember to interrupt me." Summer walked to the center of the classroom and displayed her backtracking ability. Since the time of the explosion was determined, and it had happened less than a day ago, she quickly found the key point before the accident. As magic power gushed out, the damaged wall became as good as before, and the crooked chairs were restored to their original positions. Many students appeared in the empty classroom. Some of them were sleeping on their desks, and some gathered together to chat. There was no teacher on the podium, so it should be the lunch break. Seeing this scene for the first time, Maggie and Vanilla could not help but exclaim. Then, as if afraid of disturbing Summer, they hurriedly covered their mouths. Especially when they saw a student walk towards them as if nothing had happened, but pass through their bodies like a ghost. The two of them stepped back in panic and almost fell to the ground. "Don't worry, these are just illusions," Evelyn explained enthusiastically. "Summer can backtrack time and make things that have already happened reappear. This is really an amazing ability." It was also the first time for Amy to see this, but she did not show the slightest fear. Instead, she said with admiration, "Haha, it's not that amazing." Summer touched her head with some embarrassment. "Compared to Sister Nightingale, my ability is nothing." "Nightingale? Are you talking about the golden-haired big sister, who is always by His Majesty's side and rarely shows herself?" "Yes, she's the most powerful witch in the entire Western region, maybe even in the entire kingdom." "Impressive." Amy's eyes sparkled. "Wait." Mystery Moon suddenly interrupted them. "Look." Lily frowned. "This is bullying," Evelyn said softly. 5 to 6 teenagers surrounded two girls in a corner, arguing fiercely about something. The two girls who were surrounded had completely different reactions. One of them stood in front of the crowd with her arms outstretched, shouting loudly without flinching, while the other hugged her head and hid behind the former, looking quite frightened. Since the elementary class did not have a uniform enrollment age, the oldest of the group looked to be around 15 or 16 years old. He was taller than the two girls combined, and his posture was overwhelming. However, the stubborn short-haired girl was not intimidated by the large number of people. Even though she was alone, she was not at a disadvantage at all. From the movement of their lips, it could be inferred that the content of the dispute was related to their birthplace, such as telling them to go back to the eastern region and become the traitor king's lackeys. Soon, the dispute turned into a shoving. The tall boy took the lead and tried to push the girl to the ground. Unexpectedly, as soon as he grabbed her shoulder, he was kicked in the knee, and his whole body suddenly tilted. The scene became chaotic for a while. Like a slippery loach, the girl slipped out of the encirclement and kicked a fat boy to the ground, attracting everyone's attention. No one cared about the poor girl who was sobbing with her head in her hands anymore. The crowd swarmed toward the short-haired girl, while the latter wandered in the back half of the classroom, using other students as cover. Her movements were as flexible as a cat's. Due to her inferior height, every time she kicked the opponent's knee or ankle, she could make the opponent kneel on the ground with one blow, unable to get up for a long time. "This kid is so strong," Mystery Moon said in astonishment. "Come on, beat them to the ground." Amy could not help but clench her fists, as if she was there in person. "But she's too weak," Vanilla said worriedly. "And if she only attacks one part, it's easy for her opponent to guard against it. It's not good for her to fight." "Hey, how do you know that?" Mystery Moon looked at her in surprise. I'm sorry, I just used to." "The church has taught you this, right?" Evelyn comforted her. "It's okay. Since you can pass His Majesty's inspection, it means that you're not the same kind of people as those vicious pure witches." Lily frowned and did not say a word. She also agreed with Vanilla's opinion. Although the students who were kicked to the ground looked very embarrassed, they could still get up with a limp after recovering, and continue to encircle the short-haired girl. Moreover, This time they were much more cautious in protecting their legs, so it was not so easy for the opponent to succeed. Suddenly, the tall man grabbed a chair and swung it down from behind her, while her attention was distracted by the other two. "Watch out!" Amy yelled. But the illusion only recorded what had happened, so her warning could not alert the girl to the sneak attack from behind. The chair leg hit her head and knocked her to the ground. The moment she fell, she rolled away from the attack of the two people in front of her and squatted on the ground, covering her head with her teeth. It could be seen that the girl's fingertips were stained with blood. Blood slowly flowed from the hair near her ear and dyed half of her face red. The tall boy was also a little stunned, probably because he did not expect the other party to take the hit. He hesitated for a while, then threw the chair to the ground and walked toward her step by step. Just when everyone thought the situation was over, the girl suddenly showed a painful expression and opened her mouth to scream. Although the witches present could not hear her voice, they could tell from her expression how much pain she was suffering at the moment. Even when she was hit in the head by the chair, she did not look like this. Then a bolt of lightning leaped out from her fingertips, followed by a second, a third. The lightning spread along the floor, leaving a twisted orange trail behind it. When it came into contact with the window, it suddenly exploded with a bright flash. In an instant, sparks flew in all directions like iron and stone colliding. The glass was shattered and a big hole was blown in the wall. Everyone turned around and fled in panic, no longer caring about the short-haired girl who was shrouded by the electric light. For the fastest novel reading without errors, please visit Chapter 756. Is this an awakening? Evelyn asked in surprise. Most likely. Lily nodded. During the first awakening, the magic power gathered in the body, which was equivalent to a backfire, and the pain was far more painful than a scalp cut. Many witches would unconsciously display their abilities at this moment, and it was also the moment when they were most likely to be exposed. If this happened 2 or 3 years ago, the only outcome for an awakened in public would be death. The electric light soon disappeared, but the floor and the outer wall of the classroom were ignited by the thunderbolt. The orange-red trail gradually rose into the air, and thick smoke billowed out. The girl forced herself to return to her friend, who was already petrified. She yelled twice, grabbed her friend's wrist, and dragged her out of the danger zone. Lily raised her eyebrows in appreciation. Although the first backlash was not fatal, it was still an unprecedented experience. After the backlash, one would often feel weak all over and break out in cold sweat. It was very rare for a 10-year-old girl to be able to control her body in such a state without forgetting her companion behind her. The fire did not spread quickly. After all, the source of the fire caused by the electric discharge was very small. By the time the second half of the classroom was gradually engulfed by the fire, everyone had already left the teaching building. Seeing the truth, Summer ended the backtracking. Very good, we have another sister. Lily raised the corner of her mouth. She could foresee that Mystery Moon was quite a good girl. Regardless of her ability, at least she was brave and strong-willed. Only after seeing her would she realize that not all witches were as bad as Mystery Moon. At this point, she deliberately glanced at Mystery Moon, only to find that the latter was still in shock, apparently not paying attention to what she had said. What's wrong with this idiot? We have to tell Sister Vendi quickly, Amy suggested. There's a new witch in Neverwinter. Agreed. Evelyn nodded. Let's go to the castle now. Vendi probably already knew. Lily shrugged, but she did not say her thoughts. After all, after wandering around, she planned to return to her bedroom to continue observing those tiny insects, and it was on the way. Mystery Moon? When they walked to the door, they found that Mystery Moon was still in a daze. I'm here. She shook her head and followed the others in a daze. Are you okay? Evelyn touched her head. I'm fine, Mystery Moon replied in a low voice, completely different from her previous excitement. What a strange fellow. Lily curled her lips, held her hand, and injected the queen insect into her body. Although an idiot wouldn't catch a cold, but what if an accident happened? They took the magic ark back to the witch building and reported the matter to Vendi. As expected, Vendi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Do I still need you to find out the truth? When Sylvie was in the castle, she discovered the magic reaction in the academy area. She went there and asked, and then she found out everything. Vendi stretched out her hand and knocked on each of their foreheads. Sneaking through the cordon and breaking into a potentially dangerous place without permission. You're trying to get closer to lightning. Do you want to be locked up and do 3 sets of comprehensive tests? Everyone's expression changed drastically as they shook their heads repeatedly. I almost forgot. Evelyn suddenly clapped her hands. Before dinner, I have to check the tavern's inventory. I also have a difficult question to ask Isabella. Maggie bowed deeply. I'll leave first. Me too. Vanilla hurriedly ran out after her. Amy racked her brains for a while, but still couldn't come up with a suitable excuse. In the end, she was directly dragged out of the office by Summer. Lily sighed. If Vendi really wants to punish you, do you think you can escape like this? Besides, 3 sets of test questions will only take you 1 night. It's not a bad idea to consolidate the knowledge you've learned. After apologizing to Vendi with her hand on Mystery Moon's head, she also returned to her bedroom. Can you tell me now? What happened? Closing the door, Lily looked at her sorrowful roommate and rolled her eyes. Don't you want me to care about you like this? Lily. Mystery Moon's nose twitched. New witches can discharge electricity. So what? Electricity is magnetism. Magnetism is electricity. In other words, I'm her and she's me. Mystery Moon said worriedly. What if she's stronger than me and His Majesty doesn't need me anymore? Pfft. Lily almost choked on her saliva. How can you say that? Even if you two have the same ability, His Majesty won't deliberately not use the other one. But there will always be comparisons. Then you'll always be different. Lily suddenly froze. Always. Different? Wait. What did you say before? Electricity is magnetism? A little behind. She's me. I see. Lily only felt a bang in her head, and a new idea appeared in her mind. She no longer cared about Mystery Moon. She ran to the desk, picked up a drop of water from a cup, put it under the microscope, and focused on adjusting the focus. What do you mean by I see? Mystery Moon protested. Hey, can't you comfort me a little more? Don't bother me. She waved her hand. If you don't want to be outdone by her, you'd better start to study hard from now on. That way you may have a little hope. Yes, comparisons were always different. No matter how many tiny worms she drew to make the parent as similar as possible to the target, the parent could never become the target. Because of the limitations of observation, she could not see every detail of the worm. As long as she magnified the microscope a little more, or the worm moved, the parent she made through comparison would become very different. If she wanted to transform it into a specific worm, the two should be one. Lily soon found a target, a transparent worm that looked like a rotten grape. This kind of worm was very common in the water, and she often used it as a comparison. She gently touched the glass and summoned an invisible parent worm. She restrained its impulse to assimilate the target, and used its tentacles to approach the grape worm little by little, gradually overlapping with the target. Then the parent worm began to infiltrate the body of the grape worm, occupying every corner of its body until its whole body turned light purple. The parent worm was the worm, and the worm was also the parent worm. When she released the restriction for the first time, the parent worm did not instantly change back to its original form as usual, but began to swim in the form of a grape worm. All kinds of worms around it turned into rotten grapes, and this process soon spread to the whole water drop. After a quarter of an hour, Lily could no longer find any tiny worms except for the grape worm. For the fastest and error-free novel reading, visit Chapter 757. Your Majesty, the statistics of the accident treatment are out. Barav and Scroll walked into Roland's office together. Oh, Roland asked with concern. How's the situation? Fortunately, no one was seriously injured. The reply from the City Hall director made him feel relieved. 3 people suffered fractures, all of which were caused by falling down while escaping. 2 people lost their hearing, which was probably caused by the explosion. One person was burned, but after Miss Nana's treatment, everyone has recovered. At that time, the teachers who were taking a lunch break in the lounge immediately organized an evacuation after hearing the loud noise. Phil and Eltec claimed that the First Army was practicing, simulating the enemy's raid on the school, and asked the students to cooperate and not panic. This statement helped to maintain the order at the scene, except for the 6th class who witnessed the witch's awakening. Scroll added, so the patients with fractures and hearing loss were all students from the same class. As expected of the light of dawn, Roland could not help but praise. Using the First Army's great prestige in Neverwinter not only made it convenient to maintain order, but also to reduce panic. In this way, the impact was reduced to a minimum. As long as appropriate remedial measures were taken afterwards, most people would not realize that the awakening of witches was actually a very dangerous process. Of course, it was also crucial for the awakened to control their abilities within a very small range. The loud explosion was caused by the electric current breaking through the air and forming an arc path with the metal bolts on the window. The principle of the explosion was the same as the sound of thunder. It sounded earth-shattering, but it was not very harmful. As for putting out the fire, Agatha was good at it. When she arrived at the scene, it only took her a few minutes to freeze the source of the fire, so the main teaching building was spared. Although Roland had already considered whether to replace the buildings with brick and concrete structures to prevent similar things from happening again. Your Majesty, how do you plan to deal with this matter? Barav asked. Do you have any ideas? Roland knocked on the table and did not answer directly. I think it should be divided into 2 parts. The steward pondered for a moment. The fight between the children isn't the main point. The main point is the conflict behind it. According to the current situation, one side of the conflict is from the Southern Territory, while the other side is from the Eastern Territory. The cause of the conflict is a dispute over whether the Eastern Territory is the home of the rebel king. As you know, Timothy's territory happens to be the Valencia of the Eastern Territory, which has yet to surrender to you. So, he paused and hid the second half of his words, probably because he did not want to talk too much about the struggle of the royal family. In short, if not for the adults announcing it behind their backs, the children would not have known about these things. Severely punish the parents of the instigator of the conflict, and make it clear that it is forbidden to discuss the matter of rebelling against the king. This will put an end to this kind of conflict. Please continue. The second point is that the awakening of witches may cause harm to the people. My suggestion is that no matter what sentence you decide, it should be written into the law so that disputes can be effectively avoided. Roland glanced at the old steward with great interest, but did not express his opinion. In fact, the fact that he could notice the root cause behind the fight proved that he had a relatively broad vision, which was obviously not something that the former Assistant Minister of Finance could perceive. During his more than 2 years in power, he had also made great progress. However, the limitations of the era still existed in Barav's thinking. He believed that everything would be fine as long as the decree was written into the law. However, the law still had to be enforced by people, especially in a centralized system of government that eliminated the power of the local nobles. After all, the more power one had, the more responsibility one had to bear. If the law conflicted with the demands of the majority of people, the hidden dangers would sooner or later erupt, and it would not be easy to deal with it at that time. What about you? Roland looked at Scroll. Your Majesty, I have some different views. Now that the subjects of Neverwinter come from all over Grey Castle, there will always be various kinds of conflicts. If we ban one after another, I'm afraid that the law will become quite bloated. I suggest that we guide them in the direction of their discussion, and clearly tell them what is right and what is wrong, which may be more appropriate than banning all of them. Scroll paused for a moment. As for the second point, I think you can first ask Miss Agatha for her opinion. Tequila has many awakened witches, so they should be very familiar with this kind of situation. Roland picked up the teacup and slowly took a sip. Indeed, compared to a one-size-fits-all policy, he preferred to use public opinion to control people's minds. This matter did not involve the conflict between nations or kingdoms, so it was much more relaxed than the complicated situation caused by the awakening of nationalism in later generations. It was not difficult to spread propaganda that all the people in Grey Castle, or even the Four Kingdoms, were the same kind of people. The conflict this time was just the simplest regional conflict, so there was no need to treat it as a model and deal with it severely. It was far better to write the argument that everyone was the same kind of people, that the traitors were just a small group of people with ulterior motives, and that the majority of the people should not be responsible for it in the textbooks. It was far better than forbidding people to discuss this matter, and increasing the gap between different regions. The difficulty lay in the relationship between ordinary people and witches. He did not want to make the witches special, but the existence of witches itself was very special, and there was a certain degree of irreconcilability between the two. Alleviating this contradiction as much as possible was undoubtedly a very long-term task, and it was very likely that it would affect the future of all human beings. Since there was no immediate solution, he might as well follow Scroll's words and look at the way Tequila handled it, then slowly adjust it. Fortunately, this matter had a very small impact, so it could be handled in a relatively easy way to start the implementation of the integration policy. Thinking of this, Roland ordered, "This matter will be handled as an ordinary fight. The student who hit the witches with a chair will pay for their medical expenses, and verbally reprimand them. The witch union will pay for the medical expenses of the injured students of Class 6. City Hall will be responsible for the repair of the school, and the academy will resume normal classes as soon as possible." "Yes, Your Majesty," the two responded in unison. In addition, as for the follow-up preventive measures, follow Scroll's words and try to use public opinion to guide the people. I'll make a specific draft for you to perfect and implement. Roland let out a long sigh. "By the way, that witch. Her name is Sharon. Your Majesty, do you want to see her?" Scroll asked. "There's no need. Let her rest for a few days first and calm down. If possible, ask Vendi to accompany her and tell her some basic information about the witch union." "I understand." After the two left, Roland immediately called Agatha and Phyllis into his office. "Your Majesty, I also have something to discuss with you." Before they sat down, Agatha said with a serious expression, "There seems to be something wrong with the awakening of the witches in Neverwinter." For the fastest and error-free novel reading, please visit Chapter 758. Roland was startled. "Is there a problem?" "It's like this." Phyllis hesitated. "I heard that only one witch awakened in your territory last year. Is that true?" He took out a list from the drawer, which was given to him by Vendi. It recorded each witch's awakening day and adulthood day, so that he would not miss the witch's second rebirth. "That should be it." Roland looked through the list and nodded. Although 2 new witches joined in the months of demons last year, Paper had already awakened 3 years ago. Summer was the only one who awakened that year. And the day of her awakening happened to be the day of her adulthood. "That shouldn't be the case, Your Majesty." Phyllis frowned. "How many people were there in your city last year? 20,000 or 30,000? About 50,000. Speaking of population, Roland could not help but feel proud. This year, the number of people in Neverwinter has exceeded 100,000. 100,000 is almost the same as the number of Arietta in the early days. Before they withdrew from the fertile plains, the number of Tequila was only about 250,000, but do you know how many people awaken in these 2 holy cities every year?" Phyllis said in a low voice. Even during the period when magic power was at its lowest, there were no less than 10 people in Arietta, and nearly 3 times that number in Tequila. Period when magic power is low? Yes, the magic power that fills this world fluctuates, just like the tide. Agatha explained. The 2 years after the bloody moon is also the time when magic power is the most abundant, and new witches will appear almost every day. Then the free magic power will gradually weaken, and the period between the 2 bloody moons can be regarded as the period when magic power is low. Only during the months of demons will there be witches awakening. Roland had heard Agatha mention before that the stronger the magic power, the easier it was for witches to awaken. However, he had thought that the magic power would have a peak every year, but he did not expect that it would fluctuate greatly in a cycle of hundreds of years. But we're not far from the third battle of divine will. This is the most worrying problem, Phyllis said worriedly. The appearance of the fearful beast of hell means that the bloody moon is coming and the magic power should be more active. According to Celine's test, this is indeed the case. But why is the number of witches awakening so low? Even if no witches awakened in the city, there should be many witches born in the towns and villages in the suburbs. For example, during the Tequila era, the surrounding territories provided more witches than the Holy City. Generally speaking, the greater the total population, the more witches there will be. This is the law that the Union has concluded for hundreds of years. At first, I thought that Neverwinter deliberately abandoned women when recruiting people. Later, I thought that the influence of the church made the new witches not dare to easily reveal their identities, so they didn't immediately join Neverwinter. It turns out that it wasn't the case, Agatha said slowly. Pasha has also discussed it, and the final conclusion is that there may be some factors affecting the awakening of new witches, and the trend is gradually expanding. Roland pondered for a while before saying, assuming that this guess is correct, do you have a way to find out what exactly caused this? The two looked at each other and shook their heads in unison. Since we can't find a solution, let's take it as a temporary rest for the gods. Roland spread out his hands and said, anyway, no matter how the awakening rate changes, we have to drive the demons out of the land of dawn, right? Fortunately, once the foundation of industrial production was established, the demand for witches was far less than that of the gods' punishment army, or the plan of the Chosen One. Otherwise, it would really be terrible news. What you said is right. Phyllis probably did not expect that Roland's confidence in fighting against the demons was not affected at all. She was stunned for a while, and then came to her senses. In any case, we have to defeat the demons. That's right, Roland said with a smile. By the way, I called you here to ask something. He told them about his concern about the possible harm caused by the awakening of witches. How did the Union deal with this kind of thing in the Tequila era? It's very simple, Your Majesty. Phyllis's tone became more respectful. She no longer looked directly at Roland, but slightly lowered her head. Everyone in that era knew the rule of half an hour. The rule of half an hour? Yes. Before a witch awakens, there are signs. The process of magic power drifting from the state to gathering in the body of the awakened will last about half an hour, Phyllis replied. At first, there will be a faint tingling and burning pain in the abdomen, and then it will become more and more intense until the first backfire occurs. The specific degree of pain varies from person to person. Those who are strong won't even be affected much, but they can still feel the slight tingling. She paused. The rule of half an hour is that as long as a witch loudly announces that she is about to awaken within this time, the people around her must immediately leave her side. If there is any injury or death caused by failure to evade, the common people can't ask for compensation from the Union. If there is any damage to a fixed place, the Union will pay for it. This is a new method, Roland thought. The premise is that everyone is very familiar with witches, especially underage girls. When they encounter a sudden tingling pain, their first reaction is to announce it, instead of suspecting that they have eaten something bad. What if the victim is also a witch? If they don't announce it in advance, the newly awakened will face punishment such as whipping or money, depending on the consequences. If they announce it in advance, the Union will take full responsibility. However, this situation is not common. After all, combat witches are already a minority, and there are even fewer witches who can cause harm at the early stage of awakening. In other words, in the era of Tequila, if the common people did not avoid it in time, they could only blame themselves. In that special era where witches were superior to others, it was understandable for them to do so. Obviously, Roland could not copy this method, but he could use it as a reference to a certain extent. There was no doubt that, apart from the punishment part, the rule of half an hour had its advantages. It at least promoted the idea that witches were born within the human race, and that every underage girl could awaken as a witch, regardless of whether they accepted it or not. This was just like the red light in the future, and the green light in the future, The only thing everyone could do was to abide by the rules to avoid damage. Of course, it was impossible to completely exempt witches from liability. Roland thought, if we take a step back from this rule and treat witches and ordinary people the same, and the city hall will be responsible for the harm caused after the announcement is made, and if there is no announcement and serious consequences, they will be tried as negligent wounding. Or we can make a special law to regulate the behavior of witches, just like the traffic laws in the future. Maybe this kind of contradiction can be alleviated to a certain extent. For the fastest updated novel reading, please visit Chapter 759. When Vendi walked into the hospital with a box of dinner in her hand, she saw Nana's father, Sir Pine, talking with a man and a woman. Then the two men bent their knees, as if they wanted to kneel down, but were stopped by Viscount Pine. After a moment of stalemate, the two of them could only bow a few times before leaving while turning their heads back every few steps. When they disappeared at the gate, Vendi curiously walked over and asked, "Who are they?" "Who else could it be? That little devil's parents." Sir Pine shrugged. "They were worried about the child staying alone in the hospital, so they asked if they could take her home. However, when he found out that it was His Majesty's idea to let her stay here, he immediately changed his mind and thanked His Majesty profusely. When he reached the latter half of his sentence, his tone was a little regretful, but also a little proud. Vendi could not help but laugh. "Do you think everyone can be like you, daring to break into the Lord's castle for their daughter?" She knew what he was regretting. Probably in the Viscount's eyes, even if it was His Majesty's request, he should not easily hand over his daughter. When Nana awakened, Sir Pine did not even prepare a letter of visit, and directly went to Roland's castle. Fortunately, the fourth prince himself was generous and merciful, and he didn't have any intention of persecuting the witches, so this story became a well-told story. Otherwise, if it had been the mansion of Duke Ryan or one of the great nobles of the western region, Mr. Pine would have suffered a lot. Although this had happened before Vendi's arrival in Border Town, she had already heard Nightingale's story many times, so she naturally understood why Sir Pine was so proud. Compared to Summer's parents, they are much better. Thinking of this, Vendi sighed. Summer's family had also awakened as a witch, but the only thing they could think of was the Golden Dragon. Not only did they eagerly send their daughter to Roland, but they also ordered her to do whatever His Majesty and the Witch Union asked. They completely regarded Summer as a commodity to be sold. If it weren't for the fact that the Golden Dragon was directly handed over to them, it was estimated that the family would not allow Wuxia to return home. Because of this completely different attitude, after Summer became familiar with her sisters, she gradually got used to living freely in the witch building, and went back less and less often. For a witch she was lucky, but as a girl, her parents had abandoned her. "That's also true," Mr. Tigga nodded. "One of them works in the furnace area and the other is a handyman in the construction team. They only heard the news after a busy day, so they didn't even have a meal before coming here. At least from their expressions, I can tell that they still care a lot about that kid. It seems that I didn't bring this box of dinner for nothing." Vendi smiled. "Can you take me to see Sharon?" "Of course, please come with me," Sir Pine said while stroking his beard. According to His Majesty's request, the expanded medical hospital had set up a residential area for patients, but very few people actually needed to stay in the hospital for treatment. Nana and Lily almost took care of all the diseases in Neverwinter. Most patients only needed to wait in the hall for a while before they recovered and left. The main reason why Sharon stayed overnight in the medical hospital was to prevent accidents. After all, the influence of the church had not completely disappeared. It was still unknown whether the immigrants from all over Grey Castle had accepted the idea that witches and ordinary people could coexist in a friendly manner. But now, at least Sharon did not have to worry about being killed by her family, or becoming homeless. When they arrived at the door of a ward in the residential area, Sir Pine pushed open the door and waved to his daughter, who was lying on the bed. "It's time to eat. I'll talk to my friend later." "Aren't we eating together?" Nana asked in surprise. Then she saw Vendi and said, "Sister Vendi, you're here too." "Yes." Vendi smiled and patted the box of dinner. "I brought her dinner." I see. The little girl suddenly understood. You guys talk first. I'll come back later. She said goodbye to Sharon and followed her father out of the room. Vendi walked to the bedside and put the box of dinner on the cabinet. She turned around and looked at the patient who was looking at her curiously. How does it feel to be a witch? The girl had very bright short hair, like a rose that had just sprouted. It was a rare hair color in Grey Castle. Her facial features were still not fully developed and looked somewhat immature, but with the awakening of her magic, a witch's appearance would gradually improve. Vendi could already imagine how outstanding she would be when she became an adult. I feel like there's something in my body. Miss Nana said it's magic power. Sharon pursed her lips and said, Are you also a witch? Does it always hurt for the first time? Yes, you can call me Vendi. Although it sounded a little ambiguous, she knew what Sharon was referring to. As for the second question, the answer is not necessarily. But it's not important. As long as you learn how to use it, magic power will be part of your body, just like your limbs. Vendi opened the iron box and put the hot food on the bedside table. Sharon swallowed hard, and her stomach made a series of growling sounds. She blushed immediately. Hungry? Vendi smiled and brought the fresh soup made from bird's kiss mushrooms to Sharon. There were a few green onions floating on the pale yellow soup, and the circles of oil sparkled under the light of the stove. Compared to the bland vegetable soup, one could almost smell the aroma of meat and the fresh and fragrant soup. It was especially tempting. Based on His Majesty's practice of holding a banquet whenever he met a new witch, she had also learned to use delicious food to calm people's hearts. Sharon nodded her head vigorously. Have some soup to warm your stomach first, then eat something else, Vendi said softly. Seeing the little girl wolfing down the food, even Sharon felt a little hungry. Where's your friend? Has she gone back? I don't know. I think so, Sharon said while eating. She didn't come to see you? Vendi asked in surprise. No. The girl shook her head. After all, I'm from the Southern Territory, just like those people who bullied her. She probably doesn't fully believe me, right? Wait. Vendi could not help but be stunned. You're from the Southern Territory? Yes. Sharon put a piece of bird's kiss mushroom into her mouth. Mapletown, a small town near Eagle City. But now it's uninhabitable. I always thought that you and she both moved here from the east, Vendi said in surprise. That's why you helped her. Can't I help her if we're not from the same place? Sharon blinked and replied seriously. The disputes between the nobles obviously have nothing to do with her. Those people were just looking for trouble. It has nothing to do with where she was born. Wrong is wrong. If I hadn't stood up at that time, no one would have been able to correct this mistake. Vendi was stunned for a while, and it took her a while to come to her senses. Maybe you're worrying too much, Your Majesty, she thought. This child doesn't need my comfort. The look in her eyes was unmistakable. She was sure of her choice. For the fastest and error-free novel reading, please visit Chapter 760. Did your parents teach you all this? Well, it's mainly because of my father, Sharon nodded. He always said that there are a lot of mistakes in this world, but because no one stood up to correct them, the mistakes were allowed to continue. Over time, people got used to it. Common things don't equal to right things. Everyone is just repeating the same mistakes. The more such situations occur, the worse the world will become. Unfortunately, as long as they don't endanger themselves, most people won't stand up, Vendi said slowly. Just like the persecution of witches by the church, the people only focused on the 25 golden dragon bounties, but they never cared whether the children who were hanged were really evil or not. That's wrong, Sharon replied. If the world becomes bad, it's everyone's business. Some mistakes that seem to have nothing to do with themselves will one day spread to themselves. Vendi could not help but be a little interested in her parents for raising such a child. When she pretended to ask casually, Sharon's answer greatly surprised her. They're not my parents. They're not. Yes, my parents have passed away. The girl's eating speed also slowed down as she said these words. After Eagle City was destroyed in the war, the order of the Southern Territory was broken. Homeless refugees and beggars could be seen everywhere. And the number of robbers also increased. My parents were members of the patrol team. When they resisted the robbers, they couldn't come back. After the Lord fled, the townspeople had to leave the town one after another. Maplewood Town should have become a deserted territory now. In other words, this tragedy was caused by the order for the selection of the crown prince. In a sense, it also proved her father's words that seemingly unrelated mistakes would eventually spread to everyone. Vendi touched Sharon's head apologetically and said, "Sorry to mention these things." "It's okay." The little girl's expression quickly returned to normal. It was obvious that she was not immersed in the grief of losing her family. In fact, when they set off, they were already prepared. My father often said that instead of paying the price for a mistake, it's better to put the price on correcting the mistake. The former is a crime, the latter is an honor. Honor, huh? Vendi immediately sighed with emotion. For most of the patrolmen in a town, their rule of survival was similar to that of a rat, which was to absorb benefits while maintaining a special order. When there was a conflict between order and benefits, there was no doubt that order would be the one to make changes. It was truly surprising to see people like Sharon's parents. After a long silence, she asked, "Then the person who came to see you is?" "A friend of my father's. He helped me before." Sharon licked her fingers. "I've been living with Uncle Cormac for the past 2 years. They don't have any children, so I'm like their own. So that's how it is." Vendi was silent. To be able to do this was a very rare thing for an ordinary family. She stopped asking questions and watched the little girl finish her dinner. Sharon heaved a sigh of relief after swallowing the last piece of fried meat. Her expression was full of satisfaction. "Thank you. This is the best thing I've ever eaten." Although Neverwinter was now rich in resources and people no longer had to worry about filling their stomachs, meat was still a scarce commodity. For an ordinary person, putting a piece of jerky in their oatmeal was already an unimaginable luxury. As for this kind of semi-lean meat fried in hot oil, only high-paid people such as alchemists and city hall managers could afford it. Vendi took out a handkerchief and wiped Sharon's glossy lips with a smile. "After you join the Witch Union, you'll be able to eat this kind of food every day." "Really?" Sharon's eyes lit up. "Can I eat meat every day?" "Of course. And it's not the marinated meat sold in the convenience market. It's fresh wild boar," Vendi said while cleaning up the lunchbox. "His Majesty likes the part with a mixture of fat and lean meat, but not every boar has it. Only the very fat ones can be found. They're very suitable for steaming or frying. The first one is soft and tender, and melts immediately in the mouth. The second one is burnt and crispy, which can whet people's appetite just by smelling it. By the way, he likes to call this part 5 flowers. Although I don't know which part has anything to do with flowers. Thanks to Lightning and Maggie, they were able to eat these. Their favorite pastime was to cook game when they were patrolling. In the past, they could only bring back some roasted rabbits or bird eggs. Since Maggie could transform into a 2-winged devil beast, the efficiency of catching game had doubled. Now she could bring back whole boars and snow wolves. Especially when His Majesty was in need, he could often fill the basement of the castle with prey in a day. His Majesty had always said that the Misty Forest was a great treasure trove. Now she was starting to believe it. At least in terms of providing delicious food, the forest played an important role. "Why do you know this? Could it be?" Sharon covered her mouth and exclaimed. Vendi could not help but smile. "Yes, it's because of that. As long as he's not too busy, His Majesty always eats with the witches." "About the golden dragon reward." "It's also true. I can also." The girl pointed at herself. "Join the Witch Union?" Vendi chuckled. "Of course. In fact, the Union not only teaches witches how to use their abilities properly, but also looks after and protects them. As long as they're willing to serve His Majesty and Neverwinter, they're all our sisters. Do I have to live in the castle after joining?" "That's up to you. If you want to spend time with your family, you can live in your own home." Although Sharon was not related to Uncle Cormac by blood, they obviously regarded each other as family. "What about the classes in the academy?" "There are special courses for witches because we have a faster ability to accept and learn more things. The knowledge used to promote universal education is not suitable for us. Vendi paused. But considering your age, you'll still focus on ability training at the beginning, and the classes will be arranged at night. As long as you can take care of both, you can still go to the academy for a while until you graduate. Sharon no longer hesitated. She nodded vigorously. I want to join the Witch Union. I want to be like Nana. Even if she did not answer, Vendi could see the answer in the girl's eyes. Just like before, Sharon knew every choice she had made. It seems that the ability test and contract signing can be brought forward, Wendy thought. For the fastest and error-free novel reading, please visit Chapter 761. The next afternoon, Roland received Sharon's ability report. So soon. He raised his eyebrows and took the test form from Vendi. Has she accepted herself as a witch? Yes, and she's even calmer than we expected. Vendi smiled and told him about their meeting last night. I have to say, her parents have taught an excellent child. So that's how it is. Roland couldn't help but feel a little moved. In this era, someone who could think so far ahead was already considered a pioneer. Perhaps history was driven in this way. When the belief was passed on to the later generations, more and more people would pursue it until it reached a certain level, and the world would be turned upside down. It was the same principle that a single spark could start a prairie fire. Perhaps this was how human beings moved toward civilization. He carefully read the test process and the magic power judgment. As a 15-year-old witch who had awakened, Sharon's magic cyclone was above average. The report even indicated that her level was comparable to some adult tequila witches. It seemed that Phyllis was also present during the ability test. Whenever a new witch appeared, she would be the most enthusiastic one in Neverwinter. Sharon's ability was to generate electricity, but Vendi's description of this part was vague. Obviously, electricity was still a difficult part of elementary physics. When she increased the intensity of the electric current, the magic power consumption would increase rapidly. However, the current was as powerful as thunder, and could easily pierce through wood and melt iron. When she switched to a weaker current, she had to touch an object to be effective. She could light a light bulb, but the filament could easily be burned. Since Sharon had just awakened, her control of magic power was very unstable. Vendi concluded that she was a combat witch with the potential to assist in production. Roland did not intend to do the test again. After all, he did not have any tools to judge voltage or current. Even if he knew these parameters, he could not get an accurate value. Moreover, releasing high-voltage current consumed a lot of her magic power. Obviously, the continuity of power transmission was not as good as Mystery Moon's Dawn Eye, let alone the electromagnetic gun. Most importantly, whether it was Anna's Blackfire or Sharon's electric current, they were all transformed from magic power, and did not necessarily conform to the relevant theory. Only when the ability was transformed into another effect would he be able to match the knowledge he was familiar with. All in all, this was an ability with great potential. What kind of evolution would occur after understanding the nature of electricity, as well as how much magic power would increase after reaching adulthood, were all questions worth looking forward to. As for now, according to Vendi's suggestion, she should practice on her own and study hard at the same time, so that she could catch up to everyone else's progress as soon as possible. Considering Sharon's strong sense of justice, it seemed like a good idea to let her join the Ministry of Justice. A little girl who could discharge electricity, constantly patrolling the streets, and ready to arrest criminals at any time. This feeling was really, exceptionally familiar. However, Roland did not say what he was thinking. He nodded to Vendi and said, "Let's do it." "Thank you." "It's my pleasure, Your Majesty," Vendi said with her hand on her chest. After dinner, when Roland returned to his office, he found that in addition to Nightingale, Lily and Mystery Moon were also in the room. The three of them surrounded the desk, and seemed to be arguing about something. "Come and look at this." Nightingale waved at him. "Oh my God, it's exactly the same as the real thing." "What's exactly the same?" Curious, Roland walked to the desk and noticed that there were 2 pots of birdbeak mushrooms on the desk. "What's wrong with these mushrooms?" It was not true that they looked the same. One of the mushrooms was slightly shriveled, like the stock in the kitchen, while the other was much more juicy. He pinched the stem of the mushroom, which was relatively plump, and the juice inside immediately gushed out. It's quite fresh. Did lightning just pick it? Nightingale and Mystery Moon both turned to look at Lily. The latter shrugged and said, I used magic power to accelerate it. Oh, it's magic power, Roland replied casually. Then he suddenly froze. Wait a minute, what? You used magic power to accelerate it? Your Majesty, the form of her condensed magic power is somewhat different from before, Nightingale said. If the first evolution was a purple reptile, now it has more patterns on its body, and the total amount of magic power has also increased. She paused for a moment. In other words, Lily's ability has undergone a second evolution. But it's still a worm, Mystery Moon added, and of course Lily rolled her eyes. Is that so? Roland happily picked up the mushroom and carefully looked at it. Soon he understood what Lily meant by accelerate it. You can now make the magic worm swarm into the form you want. Yes, it's only limited to what can be seen with a microscope, and I have to find a target that can be fused before I can proceed to the next step of assimilation. Lily nodded. Although she pretended to be very calm, the light in her eyes betrayed her pride. Since the tiny worm seedlings produced by the bird beak mushrooms are easier to observe, I chose it for the experiment. She was probably referring to the fungal spores, which were the basis of the formation of fungi. Roland could not help but be excited. Perhaps for Lily, any living creature that was invisible to the naked eye, or even the smallest worm, would be under her control. Good job. He stretched out his hand and rubbed her head. Unexpectedly, Lily did not avoid it, nor did she roll her eyes. Instead, she lowered her head and accepted Roland's praise. Not good at all, Mystery Moon complained. You don't know, the bedroom is completely uninhabitable now. There are bird beak mushrooms everywhere, and even the bed is covered with big white umbrellas. It's like the misty forest after a rain. Lily's cheeks suddenly became a little red. She stared at Mystery Moon and said, I don't know why it became like this. At first, the worm seedlings couldn't turn into bird beak mushrooms no matter what. I thought it was a problem with the mother, and then I changed to another one. I didn't expect that suddenly the whole room would be filled with mushrooms. After understanding the whole story, Roland could not help but laugh. Based on his pitiful biological knowledge, he vaguely remembered that unlike a seed that could grow into a tree, a single mushroom spores could not grow into a mushroom. No matter how much it assimilated, it was still a spore. It was only after the mother had changed and combined with another spore that it quickly grew into a mushroom. As for why it was everywhere, it was very likely that the mother that was left floating in the bedroom had assimilated all the bacteria in the room into the bird beak mushroom spores. Let's have a mushroom feast for lunch tomorrow, he said excitedly. Without a doubt, Lily's ability after her second evolution was not limited to sterilization. As long as it could be observed, it could be transformed on a large scale. The cost was almost zero, and it could also multiply and expand like normal microorganisms. It could be called a perfect miniature army. Whether it was used for food production or to prepare for future wars, she could play a great role. For the fastest and error-free novel reading, please visit Chapter 762. Flames erupted from the ground like giant trees baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. The moving flame tips were its branches, and the billowing smoke formed its leaves. They were intertwined to form a vast black canopy. Walking under the orange-red cinder tree, Thuram felt the temperature around him rising. Bean-sized beads of sweat appeared on his forehead and his back became sticky. This place was like a different world from the cold desert outside. The cold wind of the months of demons could not corrode the core area of the Mother Earth. Is this why it's called the Land of Fire? The golden-haired divine lady looked around curiously. I didn't expect there to be such an interesting place in the southernmost region. After a week of getting along, Thuram had a preliminary understanding of the people brought by Iron Axe. For example, the divine lady who spoke was called Andrea. She was good at archery, and even the most experienced hunter of the Sand Nation could not compare with her exquisite archery skills. There was no doubt that she would participate in the upcoming holy duel with the powerful divine Lady Ashes. Interesting. Ashes twitched the corner of her mouth. I just feel like this place is like a steamer. If an ordinary person stayed here for 2 days, he would probably become a human jerky. I'm not surprised that you would say such a thing. Andrea shrugged. You lack taste and style, so you naturally can't appreciate the customs here. Don't you want to dry your sweat before you praise? You can't see any style when you're sweating all over. Go away. Thuram could not help but agree with the golden-haired divine lady. The most beautiful place in the entire southernmost region was not the Silver Stream Oasis, which brought the Majin clan a place to live and multiply, but the land of fire and the endless cape, where the earth fire never ceased. Although full of danger, they also symbolized great power, were the residence of the gods, and were where the Sand Nation's faith was. One was used to compete for status and power, and to show the Mother Earth the bravery and tenacity of the clan. The other was used as a sacrifice, hoping that the Son of the Sea could bless the clan, and inject more blood into the Silver Stream, so that new oases could grow in the desert. Especially the Land of Fire. The whole area was sunken and slightly raised in the middle, like an upside-down basin, which could almost contain several iron sand cities. The never-ending fire had caused the surrounding sand to harden and solidify. Walking on it was like stepping into a palace covered with stone bricks. Apart from the wide and solid road, there were black abysses and shafts on both sides. The underground fire was spurting out from these shafts, constantly roasting this piece of land. But the most shocking thing was the color. Any Sand Nation would be attracted by the gorgeous colors when they first entered the sacred land. Starting from the abyss, the rock walls on both sides showed a gradually changing crimson luster, and the closer it was to the surface, the darker it became, like a piece of red and translucent charcoal that was continuously cooling. However, when it reached the ground, the color suddenly turned into a bright green. It was as if the sand was covered with a layer of crystal-clear jade. It was a glass-like object formed by the crystallization of the melted gravel, reflecting a dazzling brilliance against the background of the flames. Further up was the eternal theme of this place, the orange-red flames. Dozens of fire pillars spewed out from the basin, surrounding the high platform in the center, as if welcoming the arrival of new challengers. It was also the core of the Land of Fire, the venue for the holy duel. The alternating red and green, together with the black water underground and the golden sand dunes in the distance. At first glance, it seemed that all the colors in the desert had been concentrated in this area. If it were not for the months of demons, they could still see the sunlight through the thick smoke. Only the burning endless cape at the bottom of the sea could be compared to such a marvelous scene. I also think it's beautiful here. It would be better if there were no killing and bloodshed. His new master, Princess Drow Silvermoon of Wuxia, suddenly said, just like His Majesty said, if it's only for appreciation, it will definitely become famous. National Nature Park? Another short divine Lady Hummingbird interrupted. Yes, that's what he said when he checked the Devil's Town behind the snow mountain. No wonder he's the king of a country. He's thinking exactly the same as me. Andrea raised her chin. Come on, have you seen what he said? Ashes said sarcastically. Can't you use your brain if you haven't seen it? Just from the literal meaning, it must be referring to a place with magnificent scenery. Of course, people with shallow knowledge and experience will definitely not understand. Tisk, whether it was Iron Axe or the Divine Ladies, they would inadvertently mention the name of the King of Grey Castle during their conversation. Thuram was very curious about what kind of person Roland Wimbledon was that he could win the trust of the Sand Nation and the Divine Ladies, especially the latter. He remembered that the traveling merchant had once mentioned that the highly respected Divine Ladies of the Majin clan were merely evil targets hunted by the church in the Four Kingdoms. However, their attitude toward the king was obviously different from what the merchant had said. When they reached the platform, the warriors of the Cutbone clan, who had been waiting for a long time, hissed. The onlookers from the other clans looked on coldly. The earth-shattering thunder in Iron Sand City had undoubtedly shocked them. Later, Thuram learned that the stone castle where Rebecca, the chief of the Iron Whip clan, lived had collapsed in the explosion, along with his blood relatives and subordinates. As a result, the 6 clans had been reduced to 5, and it would be a long time before they could replenish their numbers. However, revenge was a matter of course for the Sand Nation. The blood feud between the Iron Whip clan and the Wuxia clan was not a secret. Moreover, the foreign warriors did not invade Iron Sand City, so Drow Silvermoon's revenge was impeccable. Therefore, the other clans were shocked and fearful, and all that was left was indifference. Unfortunately, they did not know that the purpose of the Wuxia clan this time was beyond everyone's imagination. Thuram thought that the Cutbone clan was just the beginning. Sooner or later, the other clans present would step down from the spectator seats and become Drow Silvermoon's opponents. They would either be defeated or become Drow Silvermoon's stepping stones. The chief of the Wild Flame clan, as the arbitrator, walked to the front of the crowd and said, "The chief of the Wuxia clan, please step forward." Drow took a deep breath, took a step forward and said slowly, "Yes, I am." The other party nodded expressionlessly and said, "Very well. This is not your first time participating in a holy duel, so you should understand the rules. The Cutbone clan will send a total of 22 warriors to participate in the duel. Now choose weapons for your warriors. You are allowed to give up or surrender, but you must not violate your oath to the 3 gods. Until there is no one left standing on the platform, the winner will win the right to enter Iron Sand City. Let's begin when you're ready." For the fastest and most up-to-date novel reading, please visit Chapter 763. Weapon racks were placed on both sides of the high platform for the 2 dueling parties to choose from. From swords to whips, all common weapons were included. The reason why they were not allowed to bring their own weapons was to ensure as much fairness as possible. For example, the big clans were fully capable of forging more sophisticated blades, while the challengers were basically poor, so it was easy to imagine the quality of the weapons they were used to. If the disparity was too great, the duel would lose its original meaning. However, Thuram knew that there was still a way out. The Iron Whip clan had defeated the Wuxia clan with the stolen Blackwater Whip. Although the Arbiter had severely punished the Weapon Keeper, the defeat of the Wuxia clan was already a foregone conclusion. No one would compete with the big clans of Iron Sand City for a declining clan that had fallen apart. It was just that no one had expected that this person, who was about to die, would one day be reborn from the ashes. It was so powerful that even the capital of the clan felt the pressure. It was the first time he had seen the Wild Flame leader treat a new challenger with such a serious expression. "Is there a rule that one person can only bring one weapon?" Ashes suddenly asked. There's no such rule." Thuram came to his senses. "As long as you can carry it, you can take as many as you want." "Very well, I'm ready." She first sheathed the 2 scimitars at her waist, then grabbed a long-handled iron hammer and weighed it in her hand. Finally, she put on a square wooden shield. "These should be enough for me to use until the duel is over." Thuram swallowed. Although he had long known that this black-haired, golden-eyed divine lady was extraordinarily strong, it was still too outrageous for her to be this strong. Ordinary people had to go through many years of training to use a 2-handed hammer, but she could actually hold it with one hand and wave it as easily as a rapier. Such an opponent was simply a nightmare for the enemy. Apparently, she had not used her full strength during the conflict in the tavern. Otherwise, it was possible that she would have broken the skull wine cup with her bare hands. "Me too." Andrea randomly picked a short bow and deliberately reduced the number of arrows in the quiver to 22. "Then get on the stage," Iron Axe said in a deep voice. "Wait." Thuram could not help but be stunned. "Only 4 of you are participating in the duel?" He glanced at the Grey Castle warriors behind him. The 50 of them were spread out around the weapon rack with their backs facing each other. They stared at the other onlookers with vigilance. They had no intention of choosing their weapons. The holy duel doesn't stipulate that the number of people must be the same, right? Ashes said indifferently. 4 people are enough. According to the rules, the number of warriors participating in the duel should be between 15 to 30. This was the limit set in consideration of the high platform. However, there was another rule that the number of challengers could not exceed the number of the challenged clan. In other words, if the opponent only sent out 15 people, then Osha could only send out 15 people at most. This consideration was based on a cruel fact. No matter who won or lost the duel, the warriors on the field would face heavy losses. It was common for more than half of the warriors to die or be injured, and even the situation of fighting to the last man would occasionally happen. Obviously, the more people that participated in the duel, the more the clan's strength would be weakened, to the point that it was relatively rare for the clan to send 30 people to a duel. Unless the clan knew beforehand that the challenger couldn't gather 30 powerful warriors, only then would they use this method to obtain an advantage in overall combat strength. Therefore, the Cutbone clan set the number of warriors at 22, no doubt planning that even if they lost the duel, it would not have too much impact on the clan. Falling from the ruler of Iron Sand City to the challenger did not mean that the clan was completely finished. As long as there were still brave warriors in the clan, there was a chance for a comeback. The correct way for Osha to deal with the duel was to send out an equal number of people. Although the Grey Castle warriors looked short, thin, and not brave, as long as Ashes was there, Osha would still have a great advantage. Her innate strength, which was not affected by the God's Stone of Retaliation, was more than enough to control the outcome of the duel. However, the situation would be completely different if there were 4 people on the field. The Divine Lady's advantage was that she had led the clan to survive in the cruel desert. She was the object of people's admiration, but she was not necessarily suitable for combat. Moreover, the duelists usually wore God's Stones of Retaliation, which could easily suppress the Divine Lady's ability and make her even weaker than ordinary people. Once Drow Silvermoon and Andrea lost their combat strength, only Iron Axe and Ashes would be left on the field. No matter how strong Ashes was, it would be impossible for her to deal with more than 20 people at the same time. After all, if the other side fought with their lives on the line, even if they had extraordinary strength, they would only be able to punch and kick. How could they defend all sides? Thuram had thought that Iron Axe, who had participated in a holy duel, would be familiar with such common sense. Moreover, they did not ask him to sit in on the discussion of the duel, so he did not pay too much attention to this matter. He did not expect that this group of people would be so careless. He stared dumbfoundedly at the 4 people walking up to the high platform. He could not help but shiver. Sweat was dripping from his forehead, but he still felt like he was standing naked in the cold desert. It was as if the blooming fire trees around him could no longer shelter him from the raging cold wind. After all, he was now a member of the Osha clan. If this group of people were defeated, would he still be able to stand in the small oasis? He was afraid that he would not even be able to stay in the southernmost region. If he had known this would happen, he would rather throw all his clansmen to them than get involved in this muddy water. The appearance of the 4 people also brought a strong shock to the others. It was a symbol of confidence and bravery to fight the majority with only a few people, but to fight against 22 battle-hardened tribal warriors with only 4 people? This was no different from suicide. The booing instantly disappeared. Everyone stared with their eyes wide open. The indifference on their faces gradually turned into surprise and solemnity. Are you sure there are only 4 of you in Osha? Faced with such a strange scene, the chief of Wildflame could not help but ask. Yes. Ashes raised the corner of her mouth. Let's get started. By the way, you should have written your wills in advance, right? The audience was in an uproar. Who is this guy? She's too arrogant. Even if she's a divine lady, it's impossible for her to block the God's Stone arrow, right? Wait, why do I feel that she's serious? I feel the same way. This guy's hands are stained with no less blood than mine. Are you sure? I'm a warrior, I can understand this. You're telling me that she's very scary. But there are only 4 of them. Won't we know the answer after a while? In less than a quarter of an hour, the situation on the sidelines had changed dramatically. All the clansmen focused their attention on the high platform. Their previous indifference had melted away, regardless of whether they were courting death or not. Their courage alone was commendable. The people of the Sand Nation would never be stingy with their respect for true warriors. Listening to the discussion from the platform, Thuram could not help but hesitate. Were they really confident of winning in the face of such a huge disadvantage in numbers? Just as his heart was filled with mixed feelings and thoughts, The arbitrator rang the gong hanging in the corner of the high platform. Then I hereby announce that the sacred duel between the Wuxia clan and the Cutbone clan begins now. For the fastest and error-free novel reading, please visit Chapter 764. As soon as the order was given, the warriors of the Cutbone clan immediately drew their weapons and surrounded them from both sides of the platform. No matter how confident Wuxia appeared, there were only 4 of them in the end. With such a small number of people, they could not even control the territory of their own half of the field. When the 22 people completed the encirclement, Wuxia would fall into the predicament of being attacked from both sides. As warriors who lived by dueling, they had no scruples in such a life-and-death battle. From the moment they stepped onto the platform, they had already dedicated their lives to the 3 gods. This was a fight for power, but also a fight to please the gods. Then they heard a melancholic song. Drow Silvermoon's song instantly drowned out the roar of the ground fire and the roar of the Styx River. The song was ethereal and sweet, as if it came from the distant sky. However, it contained a strong sense of loss, pain, and mourning. Anyone who heard it could not help but want to cry. The Cutbone warriors could not help but stop in their tracks. No. Stop. What are you doing? Stop. You're desecrating the Holy Land. Traitors. I'll kill you. The expressions of the onlookers suddenly changed. Some pointed at the Cutbone clan and shouted abuse, while others covered their faces and cried, as if they had encountered something extremely sad. Thuram could not believe his eyes. He saw the Cutbone warriors turn around and kill their own clansmen. In the blink of an eye, the platform was splashed with hot blood. Scimitars pierced through intestines, and heads rolled off the platform one by one. Their faces were still full of shock and disbelief. Together with the melancholic song, it was as if they were narrating the shocking massacre. However, it was only for a short moment. When he blinked again, the tragic scene in front of him disappeared without a trace. The 22 warriors were still moving forward, but their steps were much slower. They could not help it. The clansmen behind them were supposed to be their strongest support and spiritual sustenance. They had risked their lives for their clans and won power, and their clansmen had cheered for them and regarded them as heroes. But now the situation was completely reversed. The cries and curses of their clansmen made them feel bewildered. Even the other clans in charge of Iron Sand City glared at them, as if they had committed some unforgivable crime. Warriors were not afraid of powerful enemies, but they could not ignore the reprimand of their brothers and sisters. Was this the power of Wuxia Princess? But how was that possible? It was not that Thuram had never seen a power that could manipulate people's minds. For example, Kaba of the Sandstone clan was a powerful divine lady with a similar ability. However, he had never heard of a divine lady being able to make this kind of illusory power go beyond the range of 10 steps. He touched the god stone of retaliation hanging around his neck and looked at the place where his new master, Drow Silvermoon, was standing far more than 10 steps away from the platform. Was it really because of her singing that those half-naked people, who were obviously not wearing godstones, were crying bitterly? He believed that the Cutbone warrior had the same question. In a duel, this hesitation was fatal. Everything happened in an instant. The moment they slowed down, Andrea made the first move. She did not take off the short bow on her back. Instead, she pulled out an arrow and threw it at the nearest duelist. Perhaps it was because they were affected by the situation outside the arena, or because their opponents did not have bows and thus lowered their vigilance. The Cutbone warriors did not immediately block the arrows. When they saw the arrowheads, which were no different from arrows leaving the bowstring, flying straight at them, it was too late to dodge. The 4 arrows were no less powerful than a shot from a fully drawn bow. Each arrow pierced through the right side of the target's collarbone and lodged in the bone, rendering the dominant hand that held the sword unable to exert any strength. As a result, the 4 duelists completely lost the ability to fight. A gap suddenly appeared in the encirclement. The song that reverberated on the high platform suddenly changed from the previous mournful tune to an impassioned and sonorous one. Every beat of the drum seemed to be pounding on the heart, making people's blood boil uncontrollably. Ashes's figure was like a dark shadow. She once again demonstrated her unreasonable strength. Even though she was carrying a giant hammer and a wooden shield, her footsteps were still as smooth as flowing water. She blocked with her left hand and swung the hammer with her right. No one could withstand a single blow from her. Moreover, she did not use the hammerhead to smash people into pieces. Instead, she held the hammer handle horizontally and dashed around the stage. Soon 6 or 7 people fell to the ground at her feet. The cut-bone warriors, who had the advantage in numbers, were in a dilemma. If they continued to split up and surround the encirclement from both sides, they would not be able to bypass Ashes and fill the gap on the other side. Just this process alone would make it difficult for them to catch their breath. Even if they blocked their bodies with shields, their feet would still be pierced by the arrows that seemed to have grown eyes. As for the god stone arrows that they hurriedly shot out, not only did they not pose a threat to Andrea, but the god stone that fell to the ground would also be crushed by Iron Axe, who was acting as a bodyguard. After all, the god stone was a precious object that was worth dozens of golden dragon coins. If they stopped surrounding the cut-bone warriors, they would lose their advantage in numbers. Everyone gather around me. Seeing that they could not go on like this, one of the warriors roared and gathered the remaining dozen or so people around him. At this point in the battle, everyone could see that although Ashes's declaration was extremely arrogant, so far no one had died. If she wanted to kill someone, no one would be able to stop her hammer. Every warrior was a valuable asset to a clan. Her decision had won the respect of all the spectating clans, including the cut-bone duelists. They were not afraid of sacrifice and were willing to give up their lives for the sacred duel. However, it had to be meaningful, not mindless deaths. Mother Earth was not a murderer. She praised courage and strength, but she did not want to see fearless deaths. The warriors sheathed their weapons and lined up in a row. They stretched out their hands in front of them. Their intention was self-evident. With a relaxed smile, Ashes dropped her wooden shield, raised her long-handled hammer, and rushed toward the crowd. The two forces collided fiercely. "Oh, come on. Hold on." There was a cacophony of shouts from the spectator stand, but no clan was mentioned. It was as if the outcome of the duel was no longer important. All people wanted to see was a battle of courage. The spectators, who had been crying a moment ago, now clenched their fists and stared unblinkingly at the center of the high platform. Thuram, however, did not find it strange at all. The drum beats on the stage were getting louder and louder, like a horn urging the crowd to march forward bravely. Every audience was excited, as if they were not spectators but participants in this sacred duel. At this moment, Ashes's upper body was stretched into a straight line, and her legs were bent forward and backward. She was in a deadlock with the dozen or so cut-bone warriors. The muscles on her arms formed a perfect arc, which was the best interpretation of strength and beauty. However, this was not a duel between one person and the entire clan. When Iron Axe, Andrea, and Drow Silvermoon joined the duel, the balance was broken. The four of them slowly pushed the dozen or so people forward, approaching the edge of the high platform step by step. Every step they took caused a commotion among the spectators. Thuram could not help shouting and waving his arms. After a period of climbing, the music finally reached its climax. The forward footsteps finally merged with the drumbeats. The cut-bone warriors were no longer able to resist. The four of them roared in unison, and pushed the dozen or so people behind Iron Axe off the high platform. The music stopped abruptly at the same time, but the stirring aftertaste continued to reverberate in everyone's ears, lingering for a long time. The winner is the Osha clan. For the fastest and error-free novel reading, please visit Chapter 765. As soon as Gwell's Burnflame approached the training ground of the clan, he heard the bang-bang sounds coming from inside. The noise was so loud that it sounded like a heavy blunt instrument was repeatedly hammering a sandbag. "Sir Chief." The guard at the door bowed his head and saluted. Is Lorgar practicing?" He pointed to the half-closed door. "Yes, she came early in the morning and said not to disturb her if there's nothing important." "I'll go and have a look." "But Chief." Gwells glanced at him. "No, please come in." The guard could not help but tremble. It seemed that his daughter was becoming more and more dignified. Gwells was not dissatisfied with the guard's obstruction. Instead, he raised his eyebrows with great interest. In this way, when he could no longer step onto the burning platform, the Wild Flame clan would have a new successor. When he opened the door, a training hall made of thousands of cowhides, hemp ropes, and wooden poles appeared in front of him. No one could build such an indoor training ground in Iron Sand City, except for the chief clan with the largest stone castle. The hall was not paved with mud or stone bricks but with fine yellow sand. Walking on it was like walking in a desert. Although the sand was fine, it was not soft. There were many things hidden in it, most of which were teeth or weapon fragments left behind by trainers. Of course, there was also a lot of blood, so some of the yellow sand had a faint dark red color. Gwell's father's father had said that if they could dye all the yellow sand here red, the Wild Flame clan would always be the chief clan, and no one in the southernmost region would be a match for them. Therefore, he had considered that if the clan was defeated and had to leave the stone castle, not only would they have to carry the cowhide tent over their heads, but also the yellow sand. Even if they could not build another training ground like this, at least they would not have to start staining the sand again after they won the first place. At one end of the training hall, there was a row of iron bars. His daughter was barefooted, rolled up her trousers and sleeves, and threw a heavy punch at the hanging sandbags. Gwells had no doubt that if such a punch landed on a human body, it would definitely split the internal organs into pieces. "What? Are you excited after seeing the Wuxia clan's performance?" he asked with a smile. Lorgar spun her body and swept the sandbag with a roundhouse kick. Her slender legs were as fast as lightning, and the sandbag, which was as tall as a person, was sent flying. The hemp rope, which could not bear the heavy load, finally snapped in the great swaying. The sandbag spun twice and fell heavily on the ground, spilling the sand inside. Phew! She let out a long breath, and her beastified hands gradually returned to normal. "Don't say it, father. You know what I'm thinking. You've taken a fancy to the goddess named Ashes, right?" Gwells laughed out loud. "After all, in terms of one-on-one combat, it's hard to find an opponent who can match you in the whole of Iron Sand City." Lorgar pouted. "It's a pity that they've just won the right to garrison in Iron Sand City. They probably won't be here for a long time. Even if we send them an invitation to a competition, Wuxia probably won't agree. Of course, as a newly promoted clan, there are still many trivial matters to deal with if they want to gain a foothold in Iron Sand City. I'm afraid that by next spring, they will have new challengers. No one would waste their energy at this time. So I can only chat with the sandbag." Lorgar sighed. "Did you call me just to talk about this? You'd rather chat with the sandbag than talk with father?" Not really." Her ears, which were perked up on the top of her head, trembled and drooped down as if admitting her mistake. "Ahem, your expression." Gwells resisted the urge to reach out and stroke his daughter's soft, fluffy ears, and reminded her with a straight face. Although she looked quite cute, it was not suitable for a clan leader to show an expression. As the future leader of the clan, she should always be serious and serious, so that her subordinates would feel reverence and obedience. "Oh." Lorgar immediately straightened her ears and responded seriously. Gwells nodded in satisfaction. Since his daughter had awakened as a divine lady, she had become more and more fond of fighting, and her strength and ability had become stronger and stronger. In the eyes of the Majins, this was not a bad thing. However, as she grew older, the abilities bestowed by the three gods gradually showed side effects. In the beginning, Lorgar looked no different from an ordinary person. She would only transform into a huge desert wolf when she used her ability. Later, she mastered the skill of transforming individual limbs in battle, and thus gained some means to restrain the god's stone of retaliation. After all, the range of influence of the god's stone was only 2 to 3 steps. She only needed to slightly increase the distance between them to make her arms shapeshift, and ordinary people would not be able to block her slash. This made her invincible in duels. Originally, in order to protect the number 1 position, the samurai team had suffered heavy losses, and their foundation was somewhat unstable. But after she joined, they became incomparably powerful again. In the past 5 years, no one dared to challenge Wildflame's position. However, the long years of fighting had caused parts of her body to become wolf-like, such as her pointed ears and half-exposed tail. Even if she withdrew her ability, these parts would not change back to their original shape. As a result, Lorgar had become a half-human, half-wolf monster. It was not hard to imagine that she would never be able to live the life of a normal divine lady. At least, no handsome warrior would fall in love with a body like hers, and Lorgar, who was too weak, would never fall in love with her. Perhaps only the father, Gwels, would not care whether his daughter was a human or a beast. Therefore, she had to become the chief of Wildflame. Only by standing in a position that everyone had to look up to could she cover up these controversies. What do you think of this holy duel? It seemed to make people's blood boil, but in fact, it was just a trick of the chief of Wuxia, Drow Silvermoon. Apart from ashes, there was nothing special about it. Lorgar wagged her tail. But I have to say, this is really a beautiful move. She used her ability to involve the people outside the duel, and avoided the restrictions of the rules. She almost completely controlled the direction of the duel. Gwels said while stroking his beard. It's been many years since a winner was decided without a single death. I guess that even if the Cutbone clan thought of this, they wouldn't hate Wuxia. This trick can only be used once at most, Lorgar said disapprovingly. I bet that in the next holy duel, the bystanders will also be required to wear God's stones of retaliation. Besides, although Wuxia's method can win the opponent's respect, it's tantamount to asking for trouble. Respect can't fill one's stomach. After the short period of recuperation, perhaps their first challenger will be the Cutbone clan, who has made a comeback. Gwels patted his daughter's shoulder in relief. Being able to see this and putting the clan's interests as the top priority, she already had the qualifications to be the clan leader. Perhaps she wanted an evenly matched and hardy battle, but she would not deliberately look for such an opportunity and ignore the threat. At this moment, the guard outside the training hall suddenly walked in quickly. After saluting the two, he reported, "Chief, we just received news that the Wuxia clan has once again issued a request for a holy duel." What? Gwels was startled and could not help but change his expression. It had only been a day since they won the right to enter Iron Sand City. To whom? To the fourth-ranked Sandstorm clan. They didn't move from the small oasis to Iron Sand City. Yes, and some people said that they refused the Cutbone clan's arrangement to move out. Damn, what the hell are these people thinking? Could it be that Wuxia's goal is not simply to enter Iron Sand City? It seems that we've all guessed wrong. Lorgar was silent for a while, then she chuckled. Perhaps the opportunity to fight with ashes isn't as far away as I thought. What do you think, Father? For the fastest and error-free novel reading, please visit Chapter 766. After nightfall, the Skullwine Cup became the liveliest place in the small oasis. I saw the battle between Wuxia and the Sandstorm clan with my own eyes. A customer drank up his fire lantern wine in one gulp and said loudly, "That black-haired divine lady was unstoppable." As soon as the gong sounded, she rushed to the opponent's divine lady and knocked her out with a shield. Isn't the divine lady of the Sandstorm clan Sandra Sandstorm? She can turn sand into armor and manipulate sand to attack. How could she be defeated in one blow? Someone questioned. Even if she couldn't react in time, the sand armor is usually wrapped around the body in advance. It's even harder than the armor of the Northerners. How can you say that it couldn't block the shield? Why would I lie to you? I wasn't the only one who saw it. The customer shouted unhappily. The sand armor may be hard, but I didn't see it work at all. The moment the Wuxia divine lady rushed over, all the sand on her body fell to the ground. She took a heavy blow with her face. You all know how the Wuxia divine lady withstood more than 10 Cutbone warriors alone in the first duel. With that kind of strength, she was already merciful enough not to be killed on the spot. All the sand fell to the ground. Is she wearing a god stone of retaliation? Maybe, I'm not sure about that. But the duelists of the Cutbone and Sandstorm clans must have worn god stones. Maybe this thing doesn't work on her. A divine lady who isn't afraid of god stones. How is that possible? Can you stop interrupting? Someone said unhappily. Give him another glass of wine, and let him continue. Thank you. The customer took a sip of his freshly refilled beer and said, the Sandstorm clan probably didn't expect their divine lady to be the first to fall. Their formation immediately fell into chaos. They only sent half of their maximum number of people, so the divine lady must be the core of the battle. Once the divine lady fell, there was no suspense about the outcome of the battle. Still no one died? That's right. All 15 of them survived. They were either shot in the shoulder or knee, or knocked out by the divine lady. The crowd immediately started whispering to each other. But that's nothing, the customer said excitedly. He stood on the bar counter and attracted everyone's attention. The duel the day before yesterday was unforgettable. Wuxia challenged the Black River clan, a large clan known for their bravery and brutality. You should have heard of the name of Blackwater. Very few duelists can survive if they encounter them. They didn't have a goddess, but all of them were first-rate warriors, and they even sent out a total of 30 people. Compared to the previous 2 matches, this is a completely bloody battle. But silenced the discussion in the tavern. Everyone was waiting for him to finish his sentence. However, not a single person has died on the Land of Scorching Flames high platform. The customer said loudly. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Impossible. I even went to Iron Sand City to do business today. Everyone in the city was talking about the heavy loss of the Black River clan. They even hung a black flag in front of their stone castle. Obviously they were mourning. But you said that not a single person died? Hey, listen carefully to what I'm saying. The customer waved his finger. What I'm saying is, not a single person died on the duel platform. I can testify to that, someone soon shouted. I was there at the time. That's right. Although I didn't make it to the second round of the holy duel. At least I didn't miss the one the day before yesterday. At that time, it could even be said to be a river of blood. It's incredible that they could do this. Another person echoed. What do you mean? Hurry up and tell us. Maid, give him 3 more cups. In fact, it's easy to understand. It's not that the black-haired divine lady didn't give the Black River clan a chance. But even if they broke their arms or legs, they still wanted to bite off a piece of meat with their teeth. Under such circumstances, she could only make them unable to fight back. The customer deliberately paused here. The divine lady used a long knife to cut off their arms and legs, and then kicked them off the platform one by one. If they broke an arm or a leg, they could still survive if they were bandaged in time. But to break both their arms and legs? It's almost impossible for them to make it back to Iron Sand City. The bleeding alone could kill them. But can you blame the Wuxia clan? He gulped down a mouthful of wine and asked repeatedly, do you think it's possible? It can't be. They didn't do this before. They were forced to do it this time. At least they didn't die on the platform. It's enough to prove that the divine lady didn't mean to kill them. That's right. In my opinion, the Black River clan deserved it. They didn't know who their opponent was. They thought their desperate appearance could scare the Wuxia clan. Well said. Boss, give everyone a glass of fiery lantern. I'll pay for it. Someone looked at the second floor of the tavern. Thuram, who had been leaning against the window on the second floor, clapped his hands. No need. I'll pay for this round. Everyone gets a glass. To Wuxia. To Wuxia. A burst of cheers suddenly broke out downstairs. Thuram drank the wine in his glass in one gulp and let out a long sigh. In the past week, the number of customers visiting the Skull Wine Glass had increased. The originally spacious first floor had become crowded, and there was only one thing people were talking about: the holy duel. In fact, not only the tavern, but the entire small oasis had become overcrowded. Wherever he went, he could see the dying or half-dead from various clans inquiring about the news of Wuxia. This was something that would never have happened in the past, because an excessive population would be a great burden to the manager of the oasis. It would consume the little food in the granary, and at the same time, it would easily attract malicious challengers. According to the watchdog's practice, the small oasis only accepted Sand Nation people who could bring benefits to the oasis, either merchants or warriors who wanted to seek refuge. It was the new Master Drow Silvermoon's order that the clans scattered in every corner of the Silver Stream Oasis were allowed to gather here. If he was still the old Thuram, his daily work would be to earn some golden dragon for the watchdog and save some for himself. He would have been more than happy to encounter such a situation. But now his fate was firmly tied with the Osha clan. He was exhausted just letting his subordinates control the order of the small oasis. Fortunately, the new master had also taken this into consideration. After the first duel, Drow left him in the oasis and focused on controlling the situation in the rear. In order to ensure an adequate food supply, Iron Axe not only brought a batch of food from the Cutbone clan, but also took out Golden Dragon to buy from the other two small oases. The one that refused was swept out by Greycastle's army the next day, and its territory was directly traded to the Silver Stream tribe, which had a relatively abundant supply of food. In fact, at this point he had no idea what the Osha people were planning. They let an unharmed tribe become the challengers, and then let the warriors of the Cutbone clan and the Sandstorm clan go, so that they could recover their full strength after a short rest. Even if they wanted to be the leader of the clans, it was meaningless to do such a thing. The only thing that comforted Thuram was that the goddesses brought back by Drow Silvermoon were indeed extraordinarily powerful. Every time they fought, there were only 4 of them, and they had defeated 3 clans in a row. Now there were only 2 clans left standing in their way. Tonight, he would wait for the news from the Land of Fire. Chapter 767. In the middle of the night, a messenger ran into the tavern panting. "We won! We won!" he shouted in a hoarse voice, not bothering to take a sip of wine. "Sir, the Osha clan won." It would take about a day to return to the small oasis from the Land of Fire on foot. If 2 horses were exchanged, they could arrive on the same day. Obviously, as soon as the winner was decided, he hurried back to the oasis without stopping. The whole Skullwine Cup was in an uproar. "Ha, I knew they would win. What about the process? Tell us, how did they win? Was there still no casualties?" Everyone's questions instantly surrounded the messenger. The high-quality fruit wine passed through the layers of people and was delivered to him with tacit understanding. Thuram also felt relieved. No matter what, the stronger Osha was, the more comfortable his life would be as a member of the clan. Although he did not do it with his own ability, but so what? It was not a heavy price to pay for taking his clansmen away from the status of half-dead and dead, and moved to Iron Sand City. He clapped his hands at the clansmen. "Take a breather first, then tell everyone what happened in the duel." "Yes." The messenger moistened his throat with the fruit wine, took a deep breath, and said, "Both sides did not fight. The Wildwave clan and the Osha princess reached an agreement and voluntarily gave up the second position." "What?" The tavern was quiet for a while, then burst into a heated discussion, as if the roof was going to be overturned. "The 2 sides didn't fight? Voluntarily gave up. Is this a surrender? Doesn't that mean that Osha is only 1 step away from becoming the leader of the clans? Completing 4 holy duels in a row without killing a single person is something that has never happened before. I also heard the news and rushed over. Haha, just like me. If it wasn't so sensational, who would want to leave the Silver Stream Oasis in such a cold winter? Damn, I didn't come in vain. A toast to the 3 gods of Osha. To Lord Drow Silvermoon." Thuram was also stunned for a while, but he was not surprised by the news that the Wildwave clan had taken the initiative to retreat. It was easy to understand why they would temporarily stay in the 3rd place to preserve their strength. When Osha and Wildflame fought each other badly, they would then look for an opportunity to return to the 2nd place. It was even possible that they would covet the position of the 1st clan. After all, if they could retreat, it would be difficult for Wildflame to do so. What shocked him was that the discussion in the crowd made him vaguely understand the purpose of his new master. That group of people was quickly accumulating reputation. There had never been a holy duel that attracted the attention of so many Sand Nation people. The revenge of the Osha princess, the storm-like continuous challenges, no matter how many opponents there were. They always fought with 4 people, and the legendary battle record of not killing a single person. All of this seemed so incredible, and at the same time, it aroused people's curiosity to the greatest extent. Although the Holy Duel was an important ceremony that determined the status and rights of the big clans, it was still a very distant thing for most of the Sand Nation. Some clans had never left the Silver Stream Oasis from their establishment to their demise, so naturally they would not care about the battle between the challenger and the big clans. After all, there were always very few clans that could stand out from the numerous clans. A normal succession of power was not even as attractive as the news that Wuxia had been framed by Iron Whip. However, this time was different. A clan that had once been exiled and the daughter of the chief had been sold as a slave could still usher in an opportunity to make a comeback. This alone made most of the weaker clans unconsciously stand on the side of Wuxia. What happened after that was even more bizarre. Within a short span of a month, Wuxia had transformed from an unknown challenger to the center of discussion among the Sand Nation. The densely packed heads in the tavern were the best proof of that. Whether they held expectations or ridicule, or simply wanted to see how far Wuxia could go, at least Drow Silvermoon had become a household name. It was conceivable that when the last Holy Duel came, many people would go to the Land of Fire to witness Wuxia's battle to the top. Of course, Thuram understood what such a reputation meant. The previous clan leader who had spread his name throughout the southernmost region had almost unified the entire desert. Although he had fallen in the war with Grey Castle, he had already vaguely assumed the posture of an emissary of the three gods. Was this also the purpose of the new master? The only difference was that this time Wuxia no longer had to fight against Grey Castle. The power behind them was the Northern Kingdom that suppressed the Sand Nation. His Majesty Roland Wimbledon will bring an oasis and order to the Majin clan. Thinking of what Iron Axe had said, he suddenly realized that when Wuxia really became the leader of the clans, something earth-shaking might happen. That might change the fate of the entire Sand Nation of the Majin clan. 2 days later, in the outskirts of the small oasis, at the camp of the First Army. Your injury, is there no problem? Queen looked at Ashes worriedly. The battle with the Blackwater clan had left her covered in blood. Although most of the blood was from her opponent, she was not unscathed. Don't worry, it won't affect the next operation. Ashes carelessly untied her long ponytail. Her black hair cascaded down like a waterfall. Coupled with her loose robe, she did not look like a soldier who had experienced many life-and-death situations. Instead, she looked more like a graceful and peerless beauty. Leaf's herbs are also very effective. Most of the deeper wounds have already scabbed. They're just superficial wounds. An extraordinary's physique is better than ours. After all, nutrition doesn't need to be supplied to the brain, muscles grow very fast, and skin is especially thick. Andrea shrugged. You don't know what she went through when she hunted the church alone. She hid in a place where even rats wouldn't want to stay. She lived on rotting animal carcasses. She didn't die even then, not to mention such a small wound. Ashes rolled her eyes and did not argue with her as usual. Instead, she leaned on the recliner and closed her eyes to rest. This is what a mature soldier should do, Iron Axe thought. Apart from eating and fighting, the rest of the time should be used to rest, recover as much as possible, and face the next challenge with full spirit. The other witches in Neverwinter may also be strong, but only a few can do this. No wonder His Majesty delayed the plan to wait for the candidate. What should we do next? Echo asked. We've done our best according to His Majesty's instructions. Iron Axe recalled Roland's instructions before they left. Although some of the words were very difficult to pronounce, such as hype is the most important, create a topic as much as possible, create a legend of the duel, let the whole desert hear your voice, and so on. In short, it was to attract as much attention as possible. Now that there were more and more people coming from various Silver Stream oases to watch the Holy Duel, this requirement should be met. What's left is to defeat Wildflame. And then you can say His Majesty's words in front of everyone in the Holy Land. I understand. Echo was silent for a moment, then clenched her fists as if to cheer herself up. Don't worry, Lady Silvermoon. His Majesty doesn't require everyone to understand this immediately, so you don't need to feel too much pressure. Iron Axe comforted her. Just spread your voice throughout the Land of Fire as usual. No matter how many people respond to us, the new order will eventually spread through the silver stream to the entire southernmost region. Just then, Thuram opened the door and walked in. After saluting the four of them in turn, he took out a letter. The Wild Flame clan has responded to Osha's challenge request, but they require a designated person to participate in the duel. What do you mean? Andrea frowned. Chapter 768. The holy duel between the Osha clan and the Wild Flame clan began as scheduled. The Land of Fire had never been as lively as it was today. People who came on foot to watch the duel almost surrounded the high platform. In order to attract as many people as possible to enter the Holy Land, and to ensure the publicity effect, Iron Axe rented a box of God's Stones of Retaliation. As long as the number of people in a clan did not exceed 50, the other big clans would have nothing to say. Moreover, they could not stop it even if they wanted to. The Osha clan was now the second most famous clan. As long as it did not violate the law set by the three gods. Every word of the Osha clan carried great weight, and every request should be fully considered. Ashes slowly walked onto the high platform, and was immediately welcomed by the cheers of the crowd. The Iron Zam people of the Majin clan were always full of respect for true warriors, and her performance in the past half a month was enough to win everyone's respect. Some people even called her the strongest fighter in the Northern Kingdom. Therefore, this duel had become a contest between the strongest in the Northern Kingdom and the strongest in the southernmost region. Ashes was dressed as usual. Her long hair was tied into a ponytail, hanging down to her waist. She was wearing a black robe. Neither was she wearing armor, nor was she carrying any weapons. She did not mean to be arrogant. One of the requirements of the Wild Flame clan was to fight naked. Thuram explained that this did not mean fighting naked, but did not mean carrying any weapons, armor or auxiliary items, including the God's Stone of Retaliation. Obviously, this made up for the lack of ability of the goddess to a certain extent, and at the same time, inadvertently weakened the fighting strength of the extraordinary. Inadvertently, Ashes found that through this month's understanding, they did not know the classification of witches' abilities. All awakened witches were regarded as goddesses, and they did not know the existence of the most special type of witches. The existence of the extraordinary. Probably the other side just wanted to have a good fight. In the end, she agreed to this request because she considered that the ability of the princess of the Wild Flame clan was also of the hand-to-hand type. In addition to Thuram's description, this was confirmed by the information collected from various channels. The ability of the strongest goddess in the southernmost region, Lorgar, was similar to that of Maggie. She could transform into a giant beast and obtain strength and agility far beyond that of ordinary people. This made her very interested. Was the witch or the extraordinaire stronger after the transformation? If it was an opponent like Anna, Ashes would never agree. The unpredictable Blackfire could be used for both offense and defense. It was impossible to guard against it. Without the protection of the God's Stone, it was impossible to get within 10 steps of the Blackfire. In addition, an evenly matched battle was also beneficial to her. Ever since Ashes knew about the realm beyond transcendence, she had always wanted to improve her abilities. According to Agatha, if one wanted to become a transcendent, in addition to training hard day after day, they would also have to constantly fight against strong enemies. They would also have to have an epiphany between life and death to welcome a higher level of advancement. This was also the main reason why she agreed to the other party's request. At this moment, a deafening cry suddenly erupted from the crowd. A woman wearing a hooded cloak lightly leaped onto the platform and walked in front of Ashes. It seemed that the people of the Sand Nation had more respect for their clansmen. Without a doubt, she was the opponent he had to face today. The divine lady of the Wild Flame clan, Lorgar. You are Ashes? She took off her hood, revealing a head of reddish-brown curly hair, and a pair of furry ears that were raised high. Ashes was stunned. Are these dog ears? They're wolves. Lorgar corrected her, her face a little flushed. Oh, don't you wear shoes? The ground should be very hot, right? She lowered her eyes and glanced at the other party's bare feet. The Majins are never afraid of hot sand. She took turns standing on her tiptoes and took off her cloak at the same time, revealing her fluffy tail behind her. Judging from her expression, it's obviously very hot. Ashes shrugged. Maintaining the form all the time to adapt to the consumption of magic power? That's a good way to practice. I don't know what you're talking about. Lorgar swayed her tail. This is the price of the ability granted by the three gods, not a way to practice. I can't restore my human form, so I can only live in a half-human, half-beast form. So that's how it is, Ashes suddenly realized. It was because she didn't want to expose her appearance. That's why she wore a cloak in such a hot place. And after getting on the stage and showing her beast form, it would make people misunderstand that she had entered a state of battle. It seemed that the giant beast mentioned in the intelligence was a giant wolf. She just didn't know if using bones to lure her would cause her to instantly change her target, thus greatly reducing her combat power? At least for Maggie, this method was very effective. What are you laughing at? She frowned. Are you looking down on me? No, nothing. Ashes suppressed the smile on her face. I just thought of an interesting friend. Since you're ready, let's start. That's what I was thinking. Lorgar raised her hands, and the smooth arms that originally belonged to a woman suddenly swelled up and instantly turned into a pair of thick wolf claws. Father, please sound the gong. This is partial beastification at will? Ashes raised her eyebrows. It seemed that although she knew nothing about the mystery of magic power, she still followed her instinct and mastered the way to use magic power. This was difficult even for Maggie, and she only showed it in an emergency. As the chief of Wild Flame hit the gong hard, Lorgar stomped on the ground and rushed toward her. Although the wolf girl was very fast, in the eyes of Ashes she was not much different from an ordinary person. Ashes could even judge the opponent's next step and occupy a position in advance to attack first. But she didn't do so. Lorgar obviously didn't use her full strength, but intended to use this form to test her strength first. Ashes intended to use a head-on method to let the opponent understand that there was no chance of defeating her without transforming into a complete form. She stretched out her hands and grabbed the wolf girl's claws like iron pincers. Then she twisted her body, lifted the wolf girl over her shoulder, and smashed her hard on the ground with the momentum of the opponent. This was the advantage of transcendence. If partial beastification only had great power in the corresponding body part, then every finger and every tendon of hers was always maintained in the strongest state. The magic power strengthened the body day after day, never stopping. She could feel the surging power in her body at any time. With a punch, the place where Lorgar was lying was smashed to pieces. The latter used a roll to avoid it, and then with both hands on the ground, she stood upside down and bent her legs to kick at her. The kick that could break the internal organs of an adult was caught by Ashes with one hand, and at the same time, she tightened her grip. The skin on Lorgar's calf was suddenly torn, and it was about to be broken. At this moment, the wolf girl also realized that the situation was not good. She endured the pain and lifted her other leg to sweep at Wendy's head. Halfway through the kick, it changed into a wolf's leg as thick as a waist. Ashes loosened her 5 fingers and lowered her head to avoid the sweep. Lorgar, who had struggled to break free, didn't dare to try again. She transformed her right leg, which had 5 bloodstains, into a wolf's leg. In this way, her limbs had been completely beastified. Not only did she grow a lot taller, but her speed and strength had also been greatly improved. Unfortunately for Ashes, the wolf girl's situation was not much better. Any part of her body that was not beastified was her obvious weakness. For example, her head and abdomen. The extraordinary swung her fists, forcing Lorgar to raise her claws to parry. Then she grinned, and before the wolf girl could react, she slammed her forehead into Lorgar's face. Woo! Princess Lorgar couldn't help but let out a cry of pain. Tears and blood splashed out at the same time. The huge impact broke her nose, and the intense pain forced her to close her eyes. Chapter 769. The noise on the field suddenly quieted down. No one expected that Lorgar would fall into a disadvantageous position in just a few seconds. Judging from the muffled sound of the kick, the third princess of the Wild Flame clan was definitely badly injured. Only Ashes knew that she did not use her full strength in her straight kick, and at the moment of hitting the wolf girl, the other party had already kicked back at full speed and slightly curled up her body at the same time, so the blow was not completely absorbed. When the face suffered a heavy blow, she was still able to consciously withdraw from the enemy's attack range, indicating that even if Lorgar had not experienced a real life-and-death battle, at least she had put in enough hard work in training. After the girl fell to the ground and rolled twice, her body suddenly swelled up. The clothes on her body were torn to pieces, and what was revealed was no longer her smooth skin, but a fluffy light yellow mane. Well, it looked different from Maggie, Ashes thought. If the fat pigeon wrapped itself in hair, and then transformed into a bird, then this was a pure physical change. It was no wonder that she chose to fight barefoot before. If she had to break a pair of shoes every time she shapeshifted, even the big clans would have a headache. In contrast, Maggie was much more economical. Not only did she not damage her clothes, but she could also roll the package on her body into her hair. Most of the time, it was equivalent to carrying an extra luggage. Ow, 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 ow. When Lorgar stopped rolling on the ground, her body had changed into a completely different appearance. A huge desert wolf appeared on the high platform. Ashes had seen these wolves with yellow fur on her way to and from the Land of Fire. Compared with the snow wolves in the western region, their fur was not only thick and hard, but also thinner. After sunset, their eyes would occasionally emit a green light, and they always looked hungry. Obviously, their lives were far less than those in the concealing forest. In addition to not having rich food, they had to face the threat of other fierce predators. But the wolf in front of her was too big. Even a horse would be dwarfed by her. Just by standing on all fours, she was half a head taller than Ashes. If Lorgar stood up on her hind legs, she would probably be as tall as 2 adult men. And her seriously injured nose was also reflected in her shape-shifted body. The middle of the raised nose bridge collapsed, and in addition to hot air, there was a trace of blood. Lorgar raised her head and let out a long howl, causing the onlookers of the Sand Nation to gasp. Ashes was not the only one who was shocked. It was probably the first time for most of the people present to witness the complete transformation process of the strongest goddess of the southernmost region at such a close distance. It was normal for them to feel great pressure and fear when standing under such a burly wolf body. Without waiting for the sound of breathing to subside, the wolf girl dashed forward and pounced on Ashes again. This time, Ashes' expression became much more serious. Her opponent's speed was already comparable to that of a god's punishment warrior. Furthermore, with such a huge body, her strength must not be underestimated. She dodged to one side to avoid Lorgar's attack, and immediately realized that something was wrong. That was, after shapeshifting, the wolf's attack range was too large. Compared with the god's punishment army, which was no different from ordinary people, she often only needed to move 1 step to dodge, and 2 or 3 steps could put her in a favorable position to fight back. But for a giant beast, this number of steps had to be increased by at least several times. Just like now, after Ashes dodged the attack, the wolf swept her right claw, which smashed toward her like a wall. Bang! Unable to dodge, she could only raise her arms and block the opponent's attack head-on. Although the force of the collision was exactly the same, the advantage of the body size showed at this moment. Lorgar just trembled, but Ashes had already flown backward. Under the high platform, Echo could not help but grab Andrea's wrist. Is Ashes all right? Since transforming into a giant beast, the situation had been reversed. The princess of the Wild Flame clan had been suppressing Ashes and chasing her. The latter could only use most of her energy to defend and dodge, and could hardly fight back. Although both of them were bare-handed, at this level, each of their punches and kicks was no different from a hammer or a sharp blade. Several wounds appeared on Ash's body, and the blood gradually dyed her robe red. Don't worry, this level of attack won't kill her. She hasn't used her full strength yet, Andrea said indifferently. Andrea said nonchalantly, Ashes doesn't have any other strong points, but her ability to withstand attacks is top-notch. She hasn't used all her strength? Echo was startled. But she's obviously panting heavily, and she doesn't look relaxed. Do you know the extraordinary training method of the Tequila era? Andrea asked. What's that? a method used to speed up the consumption of magic power, so that one is always in a state of training. According to His Majesty, it's ancient and inefficient. If one has the time, one might as well read a few books and study how muscles and bones convert chemical energy into mechanical energy. She chuckled. But I think with Ash's brain, she may be particularly suitable for this stupid method. After all, asking her to read books is simply making things difficult for her. Is that so? Echo's mouth opened wide. Of course. Andrea elegantly stroked the ends of her hair. Look, she's going to fight back. Taking advantage of the distance between her and her opponent, Ashes reached into her arms and took out a black cloth belt. What's that? Lorgar stopped and growled. A weapon? There was also a commotion in the crowd. The agreement reached before the holy duel was recognized by the three gods, and those who broke it would be despised for eternity. Therefore, even if no one checked, no one would break it. Ashes smiled and casually threw the cloth belt on the ground. It looked like a belt that was tied around her waist, but when it fell to the ground, it unexpectedly made a dull sound, as if what she had thrown down was not a soft cloth, but a piece of heavy iron and stone. The wolf girl's pupils suddenly contracted. However, this was not the only thing that she carried. Then she squatted down and took off the 2 pieces of black cloth tied to her ankles. They looked ordinary, but they were made by Soroya herself. If they were made of ordinary cloth, even the strongest canvas, they would not last a week. The cloth belt was divided into 3 layers. The innermost layer was hollow and filled with specially made iron bars. A short section weighed more than 10 kilograms. For example, the one around the waist. It was equivalent to carrying an adult on one's back when moving. When she stood up again, she felt full of strength and a long-lost sense of relaxation returned to her body. Transcendence wore these things to practice. The faster the magic was consumed, the more thorough the strengthening of the body. Ashes still remembered what Agatha said at that time. Many people even brought them to the battlefield. At the most critical moment, people could always burst out with unimaginable power. If everything went well, as long as you could persist for 5 to 6 years, you would have the hope of breaking through the shackles of the body and becoming a transcendent. Chapter 770. This was the first time that Ashes had taken the initiative to attack since the 3rd princess of the Wild Flame clan had completely transformed. Lorgar did not flinch either. She lifted her body and pounced on her opponent. But this time, she found that her pursuit could no longer be coherent. It was difficult to force her opponent to block with a wide sweep. It was as if she was always a beat slower. She could have been hit by Ash's attack before, but she could only tear off a piece of her clothes. And most of the time, she could not touch anything. After fighting for a while, Wolf Girl had to use the same trick again. After her right claw attack failed, she used her remaining strength to spin her body and swat her opponent with her thick tail. This kind of move allowed her to instantly attack half of the platform. No matter how fast she was, it was impossible to retreat unscathed unless her opponent had no intention of getting close to her in the first place. Her iron whip-like tail could easily scrape off flesh and blood. Most of the wounds on Ash's body were caused by this move. However, the expected impact did not come. There was a cry of surprise from the audience. Oh no! Lorgar suddenly had a bad feeling in her heart. At the same time, she caught a figure falling from the sky from the corner of her eye. She flew up. All the onlookers widened their eyes. They saw Ashes jump up and jump over Wolf Girl, who was half a head taller than her. She landed right on Wolf Girl's head that had turned around. No matter how large the attack range of a tail was, it could only sweep close to the ground. It was no threat to the target in midair. However, it was extremely difficult for an average person to jump such a high distance. In addition, once the body left the ground, it was easy for the opponent to judge the landing point, making the following attack unavoidable. Therefore, few people would jump at will in a duel. Unfortunately, after Wolf Girl turned her body and swept, her tail became her blind spot. Ashes did not choose to show mercy anymore. She punched Lorgar's eye socket, and the eyeball, which was as big as a bowl, immediately burst open. Blood splattered all over Lorgar's upper body, and the intense and unbearable pain made Lorgar let out a hoarse scream. No matter how tough her body was to take a beating, organs like the eyes were still extremely fragile. After losing an eye, the balance of the duel quickly tilted in favor of the extraordinaire. However, just as Ashes was about to withdraw and give her opponent a chance to surrender, she found that Lorgar had closed her eyes fiercely. Her upper and lower eyelids, as well as the muscles of her face, were tightly clamping her right hand. At the same time, a giant claw slapped at her like lightning. There was no doubt that if this claw hit her, it would aggravate the injury to the wolf girl's eyes. His opponent had clearly displayed his will to fight. Normally, this level of imprisonment would not be able to trap an extraordinary. At most, it would slow her down a little, but at such a critical moment, even a breath's delay would be fatal. Ashes knew that she could not avoid it, so she did not hesitate to raise her other arm and take the hit. The huge impact made her seem to hear the sound of her own bones breaking. She spat out a mouthful of blood. This was probably the first time she had been hit since the duel began. When the two separated, Ashes noticed that her left arm had been folded into a strange shape. Roar! Lorgar roared and opened her mouth to bite her. Ashes did not move forward but retreated. She rolled forward, avoided the bite, and drilled into the dead angle below the wolf girl's neck. Then she supported herself with one hand and kicked her opponent's forelimbs with both feet. With a loud bang, the door-like forelimbs folded outward. At this point, the wolf girl, who only had 3 legs left, had almost lost the ability to attack quickly. Lorgar, enough! Gwels, the chief of the Wild Flame tribe, shouted anxiously. No, I can still fight. Lorgar replied, panting. Her condition is not much better. Just hold on for a little longer. Just hold on for a little longer. Ashes licked the blood at the corner of her mouth, and could not help but laugh. The other party's guess was right. Her condition was not very good. The heavy blow just now had made her sore all over, and her internal organs seemed to have shifted positions. One of her arms was also broken, and it hung weakly by her side. She looked as pathetic as the one-eyed wolf standing on 3 legs. However, humans could move on 2 legs, but wolves could not. Plus, losing an eye would further hinder the wolf girl's movements. If she could not hit the enemy, no matter how powerful she was, it would be meaningless. This was the experience she had gained from fighting with Scourge. Another thing that could be confirmed was that she was much stronger than she was a year ago. This was especially obvious when she was facing the heavy palm. Ashes could clearly feel the magic in her body flowing faster than ever before. Time seemed to slow down in an instant. She could even see the claws and pads of her opponent approaching. Most of the magic was concentrated in the front of her arm, giving her unprecedented strength. In the past, she was afraid that this blow would not only break her blocking arm, but also crack her ribs and internal organs. But now she only felt pain, not numbness and weakness. Was this the feeling of life and death that Agatha had mentioned? She faintly felt that she was standing in front of a heavy door. If the she-wolf could partially animate her body by controlling her magic, could the extraordinaires use the same method to make every attack surpass their own limits? This might be a direction worth practicing. Of course, the most important thing now was to solve this duel. If her other eye was also broken, she would have no choice but to admit defeat, right? Anyway, with Leaf's herbs, it was not difficult to keep her alive. As long as she dragged her back to the western region, Nana's healing spell could restore her to her original state. Ashes took a deep breath and bent down slightly. Lorgar also put on a forward posture and showed her fangs at the same time. Both of them knew that the next blow would be the last fight between the two sides. No matter the result, only one person could stand on the high platform. The solemn atmosphere infected all the bystanders. The scene was silent. Only the sound of the burning ground fire could be heard. Just as Ashes was about to step forward, Echo suddenly screamed behind her. Be careful, above you. She suddenly raised her head and saw a huge monster swooping down. Its spread wings were almost wider than the high platform. Its claws were like open sharp blades, and each claw was as thick as an arm. It was not until it was close to the ground that the hissing sound of the airflow passing over the wings reached her ears. Ashes used her greatest strength to jump to the side, out of the monster's diving attack range. She saw from the corner of her eyes that Lorgar also wanted to dodge, but because of her broken forelimbs, she could not exert force. Her body tilted, and the enemy pounced on her. With a loud bang, the high platform was smashed by this meteor-like impact, leaving several cracks. Chapter 771. Three Gods Above. That's a four-winged eagle. This beast dares to break into the holy land of scorching fire. Help, help! Guards, guards! Where are the guards? There were panicked and incredulous cries from the crowd. Some Sand Nation people pulled out their weapons and climbed onto the platform to save Lorgar, while others wanted to escape. The scene became chaotic for a while. Ashes, on the other hand, had seen it clearly. The big bird that had revealed its true form from the smoke was actually a giant demonic beast. It looked like a hybrid between an eagle and a beetle. Its back, lower abdomen, and head were all covered with striped carapaces. It had 6 claws, each of which was clearly segmented. The front pair was the thickest and held Lorgar firmly to the ground like a pair of iron pincers. Its 4 pairs of wings, which should have been as thin as cicada wings, had turned into thick feathers, which was also its most striking feature. It was absolutely impossible for such an ugly monster to be bred in a natural environment. The demonic beast pressed the wolf girl down and pecked at her head. The latter's claws could not be blocked at all, and she could only move her head left and right to avoid the attack. Her immobile body limited her dodging range. In just a few breaths, the wolf girl's cheeks were hit several times. Blood gushed into her body and dyed her fur red. If this went on, she would be killed by the demonic beasts in no time. Ashes naturally would not allow such a thing to happen. She assisted Iron Axe in the desert operation for Tilly's sake. Using the Holy Duel to decide the winner was also because of Iron Axe's choice. Coupled with Leaf's herbs and Nana's treatment, she had to deal with it seriously and respond to Iron Axe's expectations. But Lorgar was still a witch. As long as she did not do evil things like the pure witches, she could not sit back and watch her own kind die in the hands of demonic beasts. Echo! Ashes shouted, and then rushed towards the hybrid. Taking advantage of the time when it was about to peck again, she hugged its long curved beak. The sharp corners of its mouth cut her arm and blood dripped on the wolf girl's face, but she still did not move. The wolf girl raised her head weakly and looked at her with her remaining eye. There was a complicated look in her dark pupils. At the same time, Huain's soothing melody rang out just at the right time. The spirited melody gradually dispersed the people's panic, and the crowd that was pushing and shoving each other also eased up. Without the interference of the crowd, a series of gunshots came from the direction where Andrea was standing. Unlike the First Army, which was worried about accidentally injuring the witches, her accurate shooting ensured that as long as there was a gap, she would be able to hit the target perfectly. Ashes clearly saw the claw that was pressing down on Lorgar shake violently. Several bullets hit the same joint, directly breaking the four-winged eagle's insect claw into 2. After losing the clamp, Lorgar turned over and kicked the demonic beast's abdomen, sending it flying. The latter flapped its wings and soared into the sky again. Only now did the First Army's squad start firing intensively. Unfortunately, it was not so easy to hit a flying target that could nimbly hover or undulate up and down. Rather than saying that it flew like a bird, it was more like an erratic insect. Are you okay? Ashes took off her black robe and covered the rapidly shrinking body of the giant wolf. For the time being, I won't die. Lorgar, who had returned to her human form, coughed out 2 mouthfuls of blood and struggled to sit up. She tried several times but failed. Don't move. It will worsen your wound. Ashes searched her body and found that one side of her chest was sunken, and she could feel the protruding bones. Apparently, several of her ribs had been broken in the previous violent impact. Fortunately, the giant wolf form was more resistant to beatings. If she had been in her human form, she would probably have died. The warriors of the Wild Flame clan also surrounded her. They held short bows and shot arrows at the demonic beast hovering in the sky. However, guns could not effectively threaten it, let alone arrows. Be careful. It's coming again. Huain's warning sounded again. Get out of the way. Ashes held Lorgar and rolled on the ground to avoid the demonic beast's sweeping attack. Several warriors of the clan who could not dodge in time were knocked into the air. A large part of their chests was dented, and it seemed that they would not survive. The four-winged eagle obviously had high intelligence. It seemed to realize that the only thing that could hurt it was the spear in Andrea's hand. When it swooped down to attack Lorgar, it tried to face the blonde witch with its abdominal armor. It swayed left and right and flew in a zigzag line. When Andrea reloaded, the demonic beast would throw the captured people at Hummingbird and whine beside her to hinder her reloading action. At the same time, the demonic beast would change its direction to attack her. Andrea dodged several times, but she was surrounded by danger. After all, in addition to paying attention to the movement of the demonic beast, she also had to take care of her other two companions. If she had not mastered a new evolved skill that could burst out a strong airflow at close range, the demonic beast would have already pounced on her. Ashes could not help but frown. No matter how she looked at it, this four-winged eagle seemed to be specifically targeting the witches. If it was purely for hunting, there were people everywhere around the platform. No one would be able to stop it from randomly grabbing one or two people and taking them away. However, it repeatedly swooped down, either to attack Lorgar or to stare at Andrea and the others. It almost turned a blind eye to ordinary people, which was completely different from the rumors of its brutality and bloodthirstiness. There were only 50 people in the first army who entered the Land of Fire, so they had no way to deal with a flexible target in the air. Ashes thought that she had to lead it to the top of the army and use more intensive shooting to have a chance of shooting it down. But how exactly should she do it? At this moment, Lorgar grabbed her hand. "Throw me up." The wolf girl gasped and said word by word. "What?" "Ahem. Throw me up," she repeated. "When it's coming for us, this is the only chance to catch it. I can't move on my own, so I can only rely on you. If you don't succeed, you may die here," Ashes said in a low voice. "The best ending for a warrior is always to die on the battlefield." Lorgar's ears drooped down. "In this way, at least I persisted until the last moment. You're the most powerful warrior I've ever met. Ahem. Thank you for letting me experience such a wonderful duel." Ashes saw the determination in her expression. After a moment of silence, she nodded and said, "I understand. But you're wrong about one thing. This is not our last battle. Even if I survive, I won't be able to stand like a normal person again. You don't have to comfort me." She laughed at herself. With such an injury, even if she recovered, she would still be disabled. For her, this might be worse than death. In the city of Neverwinter in Grey Castle, there's a witch called Nana. Ashes slightly grinned. She has the ability to heal any injury. Even if you're on the verge of death, or if your hands and feet are all broken, she can still restore the injury to its original state. The wolf's ears stood up in the blink of an eye. "What you said, is it true?" "Of course. I've experienced more than 100 battles like this, and there are even more powerful enemies there. If you want to hone your skills, you can find an opportunity at any time. So as long as you survive." Ashes paused here. There was no need to elaborate on the latter half of her words. She saw the wolf's remaining eye emit a new brilliance. "I'll survive. I'll definitely survive." "Well then, let's go." Ashes no longer hesitated. She grabbed one of Lorgar's feet with one hand and took advantage of the four-winged eagle rushing toward the center of the platform. She spun around with herself as the center, and then threw Lorgar out. Chapter 772. Hiss 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 hiss. The four-winged eagle let out a strange high-pitched cry, probably not expecting the other party to take the initiative to attack it. It couldn't wait to open its beak, not dodging, and directly bit Lorgar. Then everyone saw this shocking scene. Lorgar instantly transformed into a huge desert wolf and slapped the strange bird hard in the face. The force of the slap was like a muffled thunder. The eagle's head tilted to one side, and its curved beak, which was big enough to pick up an adult, suddenly changed shape. The front half of its beak even broke and flew away. At this time, it was too late for the hybrid to adjust its posture, and the two giant beasts fiercely crashed into each other. Lorgar spat out a mouthful of blood again, but her 3 feet firmly held on to the other party, and her sharp teeth fiercely bit into the demonic beast's flesh. Suddenly feeling a weight on its body, the demonic beast obviously realized that the situation was not good, and desperately flapped its wings, trying to regain its altitude. But to fly while carrying a wolf girl as heavy as itself was undoubtedly far beyond its ability. No matter how hard it flapped its wings, the two giant beasts kept falling. "Andrea!" Ashes shouted to her companion. "I knew you'd have to rely on me to end this." Andrea threw the rifle to Echo, jumped to the platform with the help of running, and summoned her magic longbow at the same time. At this time, the wolf and the bird also fell heavily on the platform. With a flash of white light, the desert wolf on the 4-winged eagle suddenly disappeared without a trace. Ashes knew that Lorgar had either exhausted her magic power or lost consciousness. But being able to do this, the outcome was already a foregone conclusion. She directly tore off the outer robe of a dead Sand Nation warrior and rushed toward the demonic beast. When she got closer, she noticed that there were many scattered wounds on the carapace of the demonic beast's back and abdomen. Some were abrasions, and some were small holes, from which green mucus and blue blood flowed out. These wounds were probably left by the First Army, but none of them could cause fatal damage to the demonic beast. Ashes found the motionless third princess, who was stuck in the gap between the wings, and carried her down the platform. From the corner of her eye, she saw that the longbow in Andrea's hand was already releasing a dazzling golden light. The demonic hybrid shook its head and staggered to get up from the ground, only to find that there seemed to be a golden sun shining beside it. "Hey, where are you looking at?" Andrea sneered. "Fly again." Roar. Only then did it come back to its senses. It spread its wings in panic, wanting to escape, but it was too late. A ball of dazzling light shot out from the magic bow and entered the demonic beast's body with a thunderous roar. In an instant, countless rays of golden light emerged from the demonic beast's body, like a blazing sun breaking out of its shell, engulfing the demonic beast in its brilliance. When the rumbling sound faded, a several meters wide circular opening appeared in the center of the high platform. Only a small part of the tall and sturdy 4-winged eagle's torso was left lying at the edge of the opening. Flesh scattered everywhere like raindrops. And in this rain of flesh and blood, Andrea stood proudly, the flowing golden bowstring reflecting a dazzling brilliance against her long hair. "Why are you still holding on to the longbow? Are you wasting your mana?" Ashes, who was in the audience, stood up in annoyance. "Of course, to let the people here remember my powerful appearance." "Ah bah bah." She suddenly covered her mouth halfway. "It's all your fault for luring me to talk. What if the flesh fell into my mouth?" Other than rolling her eyes, Ashes could not think of any other expression. Gwels, the patriarch of the Wild Flame tribe, took his daughter from Ash's hands with a heavy expression. His shoulders slightly trembled as he said, "Lorgar, she's still alive, but the situation is not optimistic. With this kind of injury, even the best herbs can only delay her death." Ashes shrugged. "Unless she can be treated immediately." "You have a way to cure her?" "Yes, and it can be as good as before the duel." Gwels opened his eyes wide in disbelief. After staring at the extraordinary for a while, he slowly opened his mouth and said, "Then what's the price?" "You'll know soon enough." Ashes spread out her hands. "But what I want to ask is, do you recognize the result of the holy duel? Wild Flame isn't an iron whip. We won't deny the victory that was won with blood and honor." And Gwels let out a long sigh. At this point, no one can deny the title of the chief of the clan. If you don't believe me, listen. Of course, Ashes had heard it. Whether it was under the high platform or on the path of fire, as long as there were people standing, they would shout a name in unison. "Osha! Osha! Osha!" Amid the cheers of the crowd, Echo stepped onto the dual platform. "I'm the chief of the Osha clan, Drow Silvermoon. But I also have another name, Echo of the Grey Castle Witch Union." Her voice drowned out all the noise and clearly reached everyone's ears. "Ever since I was framed by the Iron Whip clan, I lost everything. Not only were my clansmen exiled, but But I was also sold as a slave from the port of Clearwater all the way to the king's city of Grey Castle. There, I was lucky enough to be rescued by a witch organization. Then, I went to a small town in the western region, and changed my name to Echo. She paused and then continued. Compared to Drow Silvermoon, I prefer this name. Although I've gone through a lot of suffering, I've gained much more happiness than I did in the desert. It was once an inconspicuous border town, but now it had become a bustling and wealthy city. Most of the changes during this period were brought about by a lord. He is Roland Wimbledon, His Majesty the King of Grey Castle. He is also the one who ultimately changed my fate. Ashes was stunned. This doesn't seem to be what she said during the rehearsal. Yes. Andrea chuckled. But it should be what she wants to say the most. No matter what, we just need to applaud her from below. At first, Echo seemed a little nervous, but after talking about her experiences and interesting life in Neverwinter, she became more and more relaxed. I know you're all curious why I'm saying this. After all, that's the territory of the Northerners. No matter how beautiful it is, it has nothing to do with us Sand Nation. That's right, maybe it used to be like this, but now it's different. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.